Good evening and welcome to the October 22, 2014 meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. My name is Kevin Staunton. I am the chair of the commission. Jackie, would you start us off by calling the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Haas?
Here.
Commissioner Lee? Here. Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Seeley?
Here.
Commissioner Helba?
Here.
Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Flattery?
Here.
Commissioner Forrest?
Here.
Chair Staunton?
Here. Next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any additions or modifications to the meeting agenda? Carrie, anything that we need to add or subtract? Hearing none, I would take a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Meeting agenda is approved. Next up is the approval of the consent agenda. There is just one item on the consent agenda this evening. That is the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for September 10th. Are there any modifications to those minutes? Seeing none, I'd take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The consent agenda is approved. Next item is community comment. This is the portion of the meeting where we invite members of the public to come forward with comments on items that are not on this evening's agenda. If you're interested in sharing some thoughts with us, if you could come to one of the side microphones and tell us your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to share with us your thoughts. Mr. Crabtree. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is John Crabtree. I live at 5408 Oak Lawn Avenue here in Edina. I actually attended the workshop meeting last night, which was held in front of the City Council. Commissioners Carr and Platter were there discussing the tree ordinance with the Council. I thought it was a very interesting session. I would encourage you to keep going. Towards the end of the discussion, a certain amount of time was spent discussing how much of a tree should be protected during the construction phase. Just really wanted to bring to your attention tonight the requirements of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Erosion Control Rule. I'd just like to read this to you, please. This is sections 5A7, and the site plan just a moment. It says this: the erosion control plan is a standalone document which shall include the following. A. Site plans for existing and final proposed conditions drawn to appropriate scale. The plans shall contain, here I'm jumping to section 7, location of all trees and vegetation on the site with identification of that which is intended to be retained. Installation of protective fencing so as to exclude all fill and equipment from the drip line or critical root zone, whichever is greater, of all vegetation which is to be retained. I think when you come to look at this, please take this into consideration. And I think the other thing is that when it comes down to it, you really need to think about how this will be enforced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crabtree. Other comments from members of the public? All right. Seeing none, I would take a motion to close community comment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Community comment is closed. The next part of the agenda is the public hearing portion of the agenda. We have 3 public hearings this evening, 2 variances and a comprehensive plan amendment. The first variance is Mark Larson at 5024 Bruce. Is it Bruce Avenue or is it Bruce Place? Bruce Place. And Chris, you're going to introduce this for us?
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, the request before you is a variance request for Mark Larson of Recamp Larson Architects and Dave and Cara Walters, the owners of 5024 Bruce Place. There are two variances that are being requested this evening. One variance is from the setback from Minnehaha Creek, which is behind the house, and a side yard setback that would be to the east for living space above the garage, and that's currently existing. The property is highlighted. It's north of Bruce Place cul-de-sac. It does back up to Minnehaha Creek. The home is a two-story home with an attached two-car garage. Actually, it's a lot of little stories. Everything's a step up or a step down, which has been a challenge for all of the owners that have owned the home. There's so many multi-levels throughout the house. Here are recent pictures of the front of the house and then also the back corner. That would be the west back corner of the house. A recent survey, it sits up and then the property slopes down to the creek. This is a survey outlining the house as well as the small addition to the main floor, which actually would conform to the alternate setback standards because the entire back part of the house is overlapping into the required 50-foot setback. So what they're allowed to do is to match the existing nonconforming setback with 200 square feet or less on each level. So on the main level, these are the existing conditions. What they're proposing to do is to expand the deck slightly to the point that's closest to the creek. They're also proposing to expand the kitchen out to the point that's the closest point of the main floor living space in this area, and then also the deck areas. Sorry. So the deck would match the existing nonconforming setback of the deck. There would be a main floor addition to the kitchen area to the existing nonconforming setback, and it would be within the 200 square feet that's allowed. So everything on the main floor, the deck, and the small addition to the back kitchen conforms to the ordinance requirements. And this is included in a number of interior remodeling projects that they are proposing as well. So on the lower level, what they would like to do is under that existing deck and in the areas where they're going to be expanding the deck to the existing nonconforming setback, they would like to expand their basement area. And that would be out to the closest point of the deck area above. So it would just literally be underneath the deck area. However, that does require a variance because the deck is the closest point to the creek on the main level, but it isn't in the lower level, so they can't use the alternate setback standard in order to match that nonconforming setback. On the second floor, there is living space above the garage, which is rather impractical because of the ceiling height as well as the fact that it has to be a step down currently. And what they would like to do is put a dormer in the front and then raise the roof just slightly so that they have a higher ceiling in that bedroom area above the garage. Now, the setback isn't changing here either. It's just going to be raising the roof just a little bit to accommodate a higher ceiling. The dormer area actually does conform to the setback. The sidewall of the garage is 5 feet away. The minimum requirement is 10 feet. The garage is actually lower than the adjacent property by quite a bit. It's the property to the east is elevated. You can see that in this front elevation. This is the existing condition of the garage, and then the next door neighbor with this gray box is just sort of indicating the height and location of the adjacent home. It is at a higher elevation than the existing garage. And then this would be the improved condition. The ridge line would just increase slightly, and then they would add a dormer in the front. And then this would be the new east elevation as opposed to what's existing there currently. The area that's slightly colored out would be the increase in height to the ridge line. And then you can see that this is the elevation or grade that would be adjacent, and the garage's grade is much lower. Here's the rear elevation of the property showing the existing deck and kitchen area. Again, the kitchen area expansion does conform to the ordinance requirements, as does the deck expansion, which is right here. What you see that will be different is that there's going to be an expansion of that basement area that will literally be the roof for that deck area above. So the elevation doesn't change all that much, and it won't be getting any closer to the creek in terms of any sort of structure area that's there currently. This is the west side elevation, really doesn't change much. You do see a little bit of a change in the deck. Here are some photographs showing the existing condition. You can see the deck as it currently exists where lattice is. Now you will see some windows in the back wall of that basement, which will be, some of it will be below grade. These photographs show the difference in height between the existing roof line above that garage and the proposed roof line. It also shows you the difference in elevation between the two structures. The house that's adjacent to the east is also forward of the garage, so they're not exactly lined up with one another. Here's another photograph of the current home, the home that's directly to the west, and then the home that's east that's sitting up a bit. This shows an approved new home that was approved for a variance on the site in 2013. The Planning Commission, and some of you were on the commission at the time, did approve a new house, that the current house would be removed and a new house would be built in its place at the setback of the existing deck. And that house was to be a two-story house with an attached two-car garage. Here are the elevations that were approved for that home, and the back and west side elevations. Now, that variance is still in effect until January 13th of this year. So if the current owners wish to exercise their right to implement this plan, they could do that. Staff does support the variance for the slight modifications that they would like to do to the existing structure. One of the conditions, though, would be that they rescind the variance approval for this project. So if they're going to be if you're going to be granting a variance for the project this evening, that the current owners would have to agree to rescind the right to use the variance to tear down and rebuild on the site. Staff does support the request. Any approval should be subject to the survey date stamped October 7th, 2014, and building plans and elevations date stamped October 7th, 2014. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. So for members of the public here and watching on TV, let me just explain how we go about this. We have each of these public hearings are introduced by a staff member, and then the commission asks some questions of the staff member who does the introduction. And then once we have completed those questions, then we're going to open the public hearing and invite comments from interested members of the public. We will then close the public hearing, and to the extent questions are generated by that, we will get those answered before we move forward. The one step I skipped is we'll ask the applicant to come forward after we finish with our questions for staff, and the applicant will have a chance to present their application and answer any questions from the commission. So with that, any questions for Ms. Acker? Commissioner Carr.
Have any of the adjoining neighbors commented on the variance application?
Not at this time. We do send out public hearing notices to within 200 feet, but we haven't gotten any feedback on it.
All right, thank you.
I have a couple, Chris. You mentioned, maybe you could pull up the site plan that has the proposed on that main level with the deck. Yeah, well, that's the lower level. Yeah, so you mentioned an alternative setback. Can you walk through with me again what you mean by that?
Edina's ordinance was changed not so very long ago so that if your house is non-conforming, you are allowed to match an existing non-conforming setback. So if the requirement is 10 feet and you're at 5 feet, you're allowed to match or maintain that existing non-conforming setback on that same level. You can't add on and enjoy that setback at a different level, like put it on the second floor if you don't have a second floor. With an equal amount of encroachment or 200 square feet, whichever is less. In this particular instance, quite a bit of the home is overlapping the setback. So they can add on 200 square feet up to the setback that they have right now from the creek or from wherever if they be non-conforming.
And so that curved area that's on this drawing is that 200 feet. It fits within that extra 200 feet, is that right?
It would be less than that for the deck. It's for the house. They've added to. They're looked at in two different ways. The deck is an accessory structure to the main house, so there's less than 200 square feet of addition on the deck area.
So in essence, for the main floor, they don't need a variance. It's just the basement
Correct.
that they need the variance.
It's just that there's on the basement level. The basement level is further away from the creek than
Right.
the main level, so they can't build out to that.
Normally, it's when they're going up that we encounter this, but in this
Right.
case, it's below it.
We've never experienced where somebody wants to expand their basement
Right.
closer than the second floor.
Okay. But the point is that curved area is a little different than what exists, but that fits within this kind of exception.
It fits to the point that's the closest, which is
Got it.
this corner right here.
Okay. The other question I had is on your on the second page of your report, you talked about the fact that and I remember it well when it came through us before. We had a spirited conversation about it. We got some new members since then, so maybe we did change. And you said it's good for 1 year, and it was January 23 of 2013. So didn't it expire in 2014?
Then it has expired.
So they,
Unless I'll check that. I'll have to check the
Okay.
resolution. I could have misprinted
Maybe it
it. I
was
think it was.
do you think it was? I thought it was 2013.
It was.
Yeah.
But isn't it usually 1 year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it is 1 year, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's how long the variances are
Yes.
good for, and then they expire. Okay.
Yes.
So that probably has expired
It probably has expired,
unless we
yeah.
learn that it was a different date.
Yes.
Okay, and the applicants may have some information on that. Right. Yeah, I remember Commissioner Gravel was there for that. So. Okay, those are the only questions I had for staff. Any other questions? Commissioner Forrest.
I just wanted to verify some stuff. Now, I had difficulty from the site plan here seeing what the existing setback is of the building. And in the previous variance application, I think the original setback was 40, or existing was 40.38 feet, and the variance request was 34 feet. And this one is actually just, it's 29.75, so this is about a 5-foot greater variance than the one we approved previously. But I'm not sure if they're measuring the original setback the same as they were with the old one. So I'm just trying to orient myself to this one.
And I appreciate that. I would have the applicant address that because they did say there were some differences in that.
Well, creeks change, so that's what I was wondering.
And that
Okay.
was also new construction. It was being rebuilt, not necessarily in perfectly the same location as the old structure, but they did say that there were some discrepancies between what was submitted for the previous variance and this one.
And I think it's minor. I think it's just when we're looking at just raw numbers that this is a greater setback than what was previously approved. But I agree that the situation is very, very different. It's going to tear
Okay.
down rebuild. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Hobbs.
Chris, can you go to where it shows the garage and the photo? I'm just worried about the retaining wall. And is that going to be, is the retaining wall going to stay there, or is that going to be altered in some way?
They haven't indicated that they would alter it. I believe that would be a good question for the architect.
Okay,
Because
thanks.
it should show on the plan if they're going to change it. And that, I mean,
Yeah, I didn't
they
see
are
that,
altering
so-
a few things in the back because they have to, but they didn't show anything on the plan for that.
Nice.
All right, thank you, Chris. So if the applicant is present, we'd ask you to come up and tell us about your project. I think the side ones are better unless you have something you need to show us on the overhead. And if you could just introduce yourself and
My name is Mark Larson. I'm an architect with Raycamp Larson Architects.
welcome,
And,
Mr. Larson.
Thank you. So I can address a couple of the things that came up. One was the point at which we're building to is the same point by the previous, on the previous project. And the previous project was brought forth by a previous owner. So it's no longer the same new owners of the property, Dave and Kara. So it's the same point, but in our exercise of understanding this site, as you can see, we're really looking at the inches, and we ended up resurveying where exactly the creek is currently, particularly after this year. And so those new numbers are simply the new numbers. They've been updated. So we just wanted to be sure that we knew exactly what we were working with. And we did find that that setback line to that particular location on the corner of the deck is a different distance than it used to be
But that's
by
because
our numbers.
But that's because the creek moved, not because the deck moved?
The deck did not move.
All right.
Yep. Yep. So I think, in general, that recap was, I think, covered all the particulars that we hope to bring forth. I think generally I can just add that in working with this client and for this house, we've been looking at carefully at really preserving, basically trying to renovate the house as a great family house to live in. We're living with all the interesting levels that have been mentioned. But we found two places where there's really a bottleneck or a constraint. One of them was the lower level, where the only living space in the lower level is toward the street side of the house. And so in exploring different ways of adding some lower level space for the house, we found that that deck, which we could form that shape without any zoning issues on the main level, would be a very sort of simple way to basically tuck that living space below. And so that's why we're bringing it forward. Is it's a way to get a little bit of a view to the creek. It three-dimensionally hides below the deck and makes a really small impact and makes nice space the way it relates to the interior floor plan. And then on the upper level above the garage, there's an existing space up there, but it must have been added somewhere along the course of the history of the house. And so it doesn't really have proper heating. You step down a little bit. The structure is a little questionable. The heating system isn't the heating system of the rest of the house. And so this was our opportunity to fix the headroom and still try to basically tuck it in so it looks like it was always there and make a proper bedroom contiguous with the rest of the floor plan.
What can you tell me about the nature of the existing deck? So is this covered? Is it enclosed? Is it got a roof over it? Is it?
The existing deck is a wooden deck that just is a rectangle. It's on basically on columns, stilts, and then the space below it is sort of shrouded by a kind of an inexpensive slat grill work. So that would be
the facing of it, just to cover that space below, just has a lattice.
That's right.
But how about the floorboard? Is that a solid surface? Is it?
It's deck, so it drips through.
Okay.
Right now, and it's just got a wooden railing on the
All right.
perimeter.
Other questions from Mr. Larson? All right.
Okay, thank you.
you. Don't go far. We may have more.
Okay, sounds good.
One question before we open the public hearing, Chris or Carrie, maybe you can answer. Do we treat decking that has the ability for water to kind of drip through it any differently than we treat a solid surface in terms of lot coverage or impervious surface or the like?
Not from a zoning ordinance standpoint.
Okay.
No.
So in terms of the encroachment, we established that because the deck is out that far, that's the place they're entitled to go with this 200-foot exception, right?
Not underneath in the basement, that's why they're requesting a
Not in the
variance.
basement, I know, but up above they're entitled to be out there even though it's just a deck, not the main structure of the building.
The main structure of the house, the kitchen area is matching a non-conforming setback of the main house. The deck modification is matching the non-conforming setback of the deck. The only thing that's a problem is the area below in the basement that's trying to go out to the area of the deck.
So if they were going to replace the deck with something that wasn't a deck, that would be an encroachment as well?
Yes, then they'd
Okay.
need a variance on the main level for that.
So they're just replacing or keeping what is already there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before I open the public hearing? All right, so at this time we'll open the public hearing, and if there are members of the public who would like to comment on this application, just come forward to one of the side microphones and tell us your name and address and let us know what you're thinking. You'll have to get in line to wait. All right. So seeing no comments from the public, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. All right. So the public hearing is closed. We'll bring the discussion back to the Planning Commission. Comments? Commissioner Carr.
I would move support of the applicant's request for 2 variances, subject to the staff conditions. I think it's a good plan. Fits in with the character of the neighborhood, and certainly I think it's a creative way to accomplish getting some more space in this home, while still preserving the character of the home.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
All right. Further discussion? Commissioner Forrest.
I'd like to see included in the findings a statement that was heavily came into play during the previous variance approval, because it's addressed kind of obliquely here, but the fact that the lot it's an unusual lot with both its shape and its topography and minimal building pad area of only like 12 or 13%. That kind of explains some of the other...
Is there any objection by the mover or the seconder of the motion to that amendment? Commissioner Carr?
Just a clarification, so you'd like that to be part of the findings? Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Wilson, all right. A question for Chris or Carrie. When the last variance was granted, did we grant a building all the way out to where the deck was, or did we just grant deck out to where the deck is?
You granted the building to be out to where the deck is
Okay.
currently.
That was the subject of Commissioner Platter and my discussion at the time, if I recall correctly. All right, any further discussion? Commissioner Lee.
I just wanted to comment that I thought that this was an excellent submittal package. This had the proper amount of, I feel, drawing that sufficiently explained where the setbacks were, and that's on that sheet SBL. I know it might have been a little confusing, but all the lines carry on all the drawings, so the setback lines for the patio, for the deck, for the main level, upper level, and lower level are all listed, and they don't change from sheet to sheet. So it made it very, very clear and very efficient, I thought, for review. The other thing I wanted to say that it was just, I'm just overjoyed to see any time a building can be renovated. So the foundation is essentially staying and remaining. When I see what could have happened had that incurred, you saw was a significantly larger home. And I just think that this home has a lot of character to it. Obviously, it's going to be improved even more now. Sometimes things, detailing, different materials, exterior materials, that can kind of change with the times. But the general proportions of the building and obviously the configuration of the plan has to change again with sort of the living needs of the occupants. But I thought it was a thoughtful and well-done solution, and it just made it very easy for us to kind of take a look as a commission to see what was at stake and what was being done. So I appreciate that and want to thank the applicant for that.
And for those who are watching, one of the things to be aware of is that we have certain requirements in terms of things that need to be submitted, but that doesn't mean that every submission is equally clear. And so those who make submissions, it's really helpful to us if there's illustrations that show us the differences and where the encroachments are going to be and what it's going to look like in the proposed project as opposed to the existing. I would concur with Commissioner Lee's comments about it's nice to see an effort to save an existing building, and I think, in my view, that that warrants a little more elasticity or flexibility in terms of the variance when you're working with something that's an existing structure that you didn't put there and you're trying to make it workable. And I just appreciate the effort not to tear it down and start over, and so I'm supportive of the motion. Commissioner Hobbs.
I would agree with all the statements. I really do think this is a great attempt at trying to renovate an existing house. I guess for me, I'm just in general, the idea of marching closer to the creek gives me pause in terms of looking at projects in the future. I don't think any of us want this trend to necessarily continue, that all the houses along the creek just get a little bit closer. So I agree, and I'm certainly going to vote in the affirmative to have this approved, but it's just something to look at in the future.
And Commissioner Platter, I'll let you.
I was say the last time, and I agree with your comment on marching closer to the creek, and that's why I voted against it last time, and I probably will this time, but I'm just not in favor of building additional building area into the setback. If they had done it where it exists today and done something, that would be different, but since they're actually adding building area into the creek setback, and there's a reason there's a creek setback. I mean, it's whether something happened in the past, we've gotten hopefully smarter since then on how to protect our natural resources. So I'm just not in favor of adding building area into that setback area.
And I would just, in terms of the institutional memory of being one of the commissioners at the time, we did have a good discussion about the relative merits of that variance application, and at the end of the day, I did vote in favor of that variance, and in large part that kind of informs why I'm willing to be supportive of it now. I think this is less intrusive than that would have been, and so I think we're there. Commissioner Forrest.
And that's why I wanted that in the findings about this lot is particularly unusual, even as a creek lot in its shape, and it really limits the building area. And I think the previous tear-down rebuild, I may be mistaken, but if I recall, they did want to actually move the front of the house forward closer to the street as well as meet the existing. So they, you can't even, I don't think there was a lot of room for them to really do any additional add-ons anywhere else. And the good thing is with variances, the precedent doesn't, we don't consider precedent. Each one is taken individually, so that's a good thing. So I agree with Commissioner Hobbs on that.
All right. Is there further discussion? All right. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right. So the motion passes. What are we? 1, 2, 3. 6 to 1. 6 to 1. Is that right? I'm not the mathematician here. Yeah, 6 to 1. We're missing 2 members. All right. Very good. Thank you for your time. Next up is a variance, Scott Busen, Great Neighborhood Homes, 5300 Oak Lawn in Edina.
Well, in the meantime, I'll just say that there's an amended staff report in front of you that has some things that are highlighted. The lot is a little bit wider than what was put in the original report. And then the lot coverage is clarified that the city standard for that particular size lot with that width is 2,250 square feet. So that's on the chart.
Sorry, let me find that. And,
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, this is a variance request of Scott Busen of Great Neighborhood Homes and Brian and Nicole Schmidt, who own 5300 Oak Lawn Avenue. Subject property is located in the southwest corner of West 53rd Street and Oak Lawn Avenue. Currently consists of a two-story home with an attached garage that loads off of West 53rd Street to the north. Here is an existing photograph of the home provided by the applicant. You can see that the garage area is closer to the street than the sidewall of the home. This is the home that's directly to the south. The home that's across the street at 5240 Oak Lawn on the other side of West 53rd Street. This is the house that's directly behind them that's actually facing Kellogg. They also have their garage loading off onto West 53rd Street. This is the survey of the proposed home. It is a complete tear-down rebuild, so this is a new home. It's on a 59.75 foot wide lot. The requirements for side street setback are 15 feet for living space and 20 feet for a garage opening. There's a greater setback required for a garage opening so that somebody can legally park on the driveway. So a garage opening does require a deeper setback. They're proposing a 10-foot setback from the north lot line. The existing home, and you did all receive a grading, drainage, erosion control plan that is a color-up version, but it's really hard to see that the existing home is underneath the current home on that plan. I did give Commissioner Lee the large copy if you want to share that and take a look at where the existing home is located in the lot. The existing garage is 4.9 feet away from the north lot line, so it is considerably closer to the north lot line than the 10 feet that's being proposed, although 20 feet is the requirement. Now, along the south side, the existing home has a porch that's a little less than 5 feet away from the south lot line, and the south wall of the house is about 9.9 feet, 10 feet away from the lot line. The house conforms to all of the ordinance requirements. That's what their intent is, to conform to all of the ordinance requirements with the exception of the 10-foot setback to the garage opening. The requirement, again, is 20 feet. For living space, it is 15. There was a grading erosion control stormwater management plan that was submitted. The engineering department has reviewed it and has no concerns with the plans as submitted. The proposed grading is shown by the grading, drainage, erosion control, and stormwater management plan that was prepared by a licensed professional engineer. Create, according to the engineering department, better drainage situation for the 3 neighboring properties. So this would actually help the existing conditions according to engineering review. So the primary issue is the proposed development reasonable. Here's that stormwater management plan. You also received a copy in your packet. What you can't see is the existing footprint of the house underneath. It's 4.9 feet away from the north lot line and a little less than 10 feet to the south lot line. It is at approximately the same front yard setback as the front face of the house is currently. This is the basement plan that they have for the project, the main floor plan, the second floor plan. They have a bonus room above the garage, which again doesn't meet the required side street setback. And then here are the elevations of the home. They are proposing a maximum height of 30 feet to the ridge. This would be the elevation of the house that is directly adjacent to West 53rd Street. The area in question is the garage area here. And then the west or back elevation that would be facing the property that is along Kellogg, and then the south or interior side elevation of the home. This is a rendering of the two homes along West 53rd Street, the view that you would get with the new home adjacent to the home that's on Kellogg and facing Kellogg that's also along West 53rd Street. So the primary issue is the proposed development reasonable for the site. Staff believes a two-car detached garage or an attached garage could be constructed in the rear yard of the home. An attached two-car garage, side-loaded, could be located 20 feet to the side lot line. This is a complete tear-down rebuild, so it's not a situation where they're trying to match an existing non-conforming setback. The house has been removed and that setback no longer exists. Will this relieve practical difficulties that prevent reasonable use from complying with the ordinance requirements? The only factor preventing compliance with the side street setback for the construction of a two-car garage is the desire to have more rear yard space behind the house. So staff has not identified practical difficulty preventing compliance with the ordinance. And are there circumstances that are unique to the property? Staff does not believe so. There are no confounding factors preventing compliance with the ordinance. A complete tear-down rebuild, again, at the property allows opportunity for compliance. Will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? Actually, there are quite a few homes that do have side-loading garages that are closer than 10 feet. In fact, the house that's fronting Kellogg that is directly adjacent to the west does have a closer setback to the side street, as does the house that's across the street at 5301 Oak Lawn. Their side-loading garage also is closer to the street than the project that is being proposed. However, there is opportunity now to comply once the house is removed. Staff does recommend denial based on the following findings: that the property with the new home can comply with the setbacks and is therefore it's not a reasonable use. The home is appropriate in size and scale with the proposed garage. However, the garage could be further back and away from West 53rd Street to comply. There is not a practical difficulty that was established in meeting the ordinance requirements due to the ability to locate a garage in a conforming fashion. And there are no circumstances unique to the property that necessitate a variance to make reasonable use of the property. The property will be vacant on a 59-foot lot in a neighborhood of 59 to 60-foot wide lots with many that have been rebuilt, and they all do comply or have had to comply with the ordinance requirements. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Questions from Ms. Zucker. Commissioner Platiger.
Hey, Chris, I got a couple of questions. So you said the width was incorrect in the
The lot width is 59.7.
59. So what's the length? Is the square foot area still correct?
The square
Or did
footage
that
came off the
change?
survey, so that did not change. That's the square footage of the lot.
What's the length of the lot?
Length of the lot
Maybe I
is
missed it.
Like 135.31.
135.31 feet on the north and 0.33 feet on the south.
And then can you, I guess I'm just missing on the plans, can you show exactly where the setback, what is proposed for that? The plans don't show it unless I'm missing something. And I could be.
This is the setback that they're proposing. It's 10 feet. They're proposed at 10 feet. The required setback is actually 20 for a garage opening, and they're showing a 15-foot setback, which would be the side wall of the house. So it would be another 5 feet. It's roughly where, well, it would be where this, I think it's like a little connecting porch. So that would be where the required setback is for a garage opening. Now, if it were a rear loading garage with a sidewall, then that could be even up with the sidewall of the house. But it would be, the required setback is back here.
These are really confusing, let's say.
Did you have more, Commissioner Platter?
Well, not yet.
Okay,
but-
I'll come back to you. Commissioner Forrest?
Just to build on his question, I was just wondering, so the house, the wall of the house itself, though, being 15 feet away, that's conforming now?
Yes, the
Okay.
garage opening, because in order to legally park a car, according to another ordinance in the city code, which isn't part of the zoning ordinance, you have to have at least 15 feet from the edge of the street to where the back of your car is to be legally parked on your driveway, which there's plenty of driveways that don't conform to that, but that's the reason why there's a difference in setback for a garage opening facing a street, is to allow for proper parking.
And I just, to hammer down that point, so if they were to enter from the west into the garage, then it can be set 15 feet from the side yard.
Correct. And I think there's a house across the street that has that condition. It's a rear loading garage, and you do see that. It takes up the whole backyard with a driveway.
Right. I get the consequences of that, but it changes from a 20-foot setback to a 15-foot
Right.
setback just because of where you enter the garage.
Correct. And where
And-
you can
And I
legally-
understand the rationale behind it. You want to make sure cars
So you can park a
off
car.
the sidewalk. And okay. Other questions? Commissioner Olson?
So I'm just looking at the site plan that you have up there, and in the staff report, they're saying that they're reducing the driveway from 22 feet to 14 feet. And it looks like it's still showing up as 22. I mean, are we sure that it's going down to 14?
That's part of the engineer's
Yeah.
review, and that's what they've indicated, is that it's, and the engineering does approve and review curb cuts. So you can see that the old driveway is here, and it does look wider, and the new driveway is here. The old garage is further to the east than the proposed garage is,
All right, so it is being reduced in width.
apparently,
We just don't know the correct width. Okay.
according to the engineering review.
And it looks like from the site plan that the width of the garage is 22 feet, that number,
Yes.
right? So then if the driveway's narrower than that, it must be
Narrower. Okay, so
something
that's
less
what
than
I
that. Other questions? Commissioner Lee?
Chris, is there a sidewalk on that side of the street?
No.
Okay, and then just to confirm again, the location of the existing garage right now is 5 feet from the curb line.
Yeah, it's not from the curb line, from the north lot line. We take all measurements from
Right.
the lot lines.
Okay, but it is closer than what they're proposing?
Yes, absolutely.
And they're proposing 10 feet?
Correct. So they will be roughly doubling the setback of
Okay.
the current garage opening.
Okay, thank you.
Do we know the dimensions from the property line to the curb?
I believe it's approximately 18 feet. And it does narrow up a little bit to when you get to the width of the right-of-way, when you get to the intersection, but it's about 18 feet,
Okay.
I believe. Which is quite generous, because you don't generally have that much distance between the lot
Right.
line and the street
Which is
edge.
why we have the side yard setback, because otherwise you're going to be into the sidewalk or hanging
Right,
out into the
and
street.
you have that problem in a lot of other neighborhoods.
Okay.
Because it's the narrow.
Commissioner Platter?
What's the lot coverage here? The two different packages say different things, and one of them just has square feet. And what is the standard for this lot?
The surveyor has indicated on the survey that it will be 2,247.6 square feet, and for this particular size lot, anything less than 9,000 square feet would be 30% or a maximum of 2,250, and they're held to the 2,250 standard.
So the
because
22,250 is actually
Correct.
30%?
Pardon me? That would be 28, a little over 28%. So they're held at the 2,250. They can't go up to 30% for that size lot.
So what is the city standard for this lot? What percent?
2,250 square feet.
What percent is that, though?
A little over 28%. What the city requires is
Well,
that
it's
if you have
either, depending on lot size, it's either 25% or 30%. So which,
It's 30% or 2,250, whichever is less, because 25% of a 9,000 square foot lot is 2,250, and if you have a lot that's 8,999
gotcha,
square
okay.
feet, you're not going to have the advantage of having 30%, so that's why they cap it at that. And so this particular lot is capped at 2,250. They can't go up to 30%.
I guess I've rarely seen it come in that way. I guess usually it's the percentage would rule.
So, to follow up on that, the document you have on the screen says 2,303 square feet.
Is that the existing?
No.
Oh, it is existing.
That's existing if it's on the
Oh,
right-hand side.
The proposed is
and the-
2247.6.
Yeah, and that's cut
Okay.
off from this, because I had to shrink it to get it in the PowerPoint, but the,
Right, but I see it on mine.
And that would,
Commissioner Hobbs, you had done some math on this, I think you mentioned.
so that's actually 27.8%
is the
proposed,
okay.
instead
So the
of the
proposed is
28.4 that they have there.
so the proposed is just slightly under 2250,
Right.
which is, as Chris has told us, the
Right.
ceiling. Okay.
Right.
I can give you the large-scale one so that you can actually see it. This is existing.
Yeah, and then
And
this
that
is
is
the
what they're
proposed down
proposing,
here. Okay,
so-
I saw that on my. Okay. Other questions for Ms. Acker? Commissioner Carr.
I was wondering if you could put up the aerial photograph again, because you mentioned that there were other garages nearby that had a similar setback or even a closer setback to the street, and I just wondered where those were in relationship to the applicant's home.
This aerial photograph shows the house that's directly to the west, and actually they're further back. They're about 6 feet back, and the existing house is 4.9, about roughly 4 feet. So there's about a 1 foot difference between the two. But this one is closer than what's being proposed on the lot currently. And then the house directly across the street here also has a garage. It's cut off, I'm sorry. But that also has a garage that's closer, more in line with the subject home and the house that's fronting Kellogg that's right behind it. And then you'll notice, too, the house to the north is the one that I was referring to that has that rear-loading garage that you turn into.
And that rear-loading one, is that closer than to the...
I'm not sure, but it does look quite a bit closer than perhaps what it should be.
I'm just trying to get a feeling for how the garage is going to appear in terms of the character of the neighborhood.
Well, it'll be further back than what's there right now.
It'll be further back than
Yes.
the adjoining homes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Platter.
I just have a question on, it's within 3 square feet, I guess, or less than that, 2.5 square feet, up to that. How is that enforced, or how is that calculated? When is that gone out? Is that measured, or how do you do that once it's built, since it's that close? I mean, that's a rounding error almost at that point.
Well, it is close, and everybody seems to want to go right up to the first submission was over, and they had to come back with it. We rely on the surveyor, and the survey has to match the dimensions on the building plans. The building plans that you have don't have dimensions on it. I did mention that as well when it was submitted, and I was told that those dimensions would then be put on the plans if the variance is granted, and they would match, so that the building plans and the survey have to match.
So they don't right now?
Well, I don't have there's no dimensions on the plans.
So we don't really know how big it is, other than what they're...
Well, the builder indicated to me that we rely on the survey, and that's what I do. I rely on the survey. The plans can't be larger than what the survey is showing. There are no dimensions on the plan, except that they do have the width on it. But in terms of, at building permit application, they have to have dimension plans, and the dimension plans need to be consistent with the survey.
Is there an as-built survey done after
Yes.
the fact?
Yes, setbacks are verified by the building department
Well,
when they do their inspection.
not just the setbacks, but the building area?
Well, if the setbacks match the survey, then it's going to match the
You know,
coverage.
they change the shape, or it could be on a side where it doesn't have anything to do with the setback.
Well, the building plans have to match the survey, and they do an as-built at foundation, and now they do an as-built for the grading, and they all have to be consistent. We've been run into a few problems where people have added patio area after the fact. They've decided, and this isn't, perhaps the builder that's built the house. There's been some patio area added in addition to a sidewalk area, and we do count patio, and there's some people that don't realize that, and we've gotten an as-built survey back towards the end of the project, and there's been an issue with that, and we've had to have people cut back their patios because it doesn't match the numbers that were on the as-built, or on the proposed to the as-built that we get at foundation, and then at the end when they're doing the final.
So you'd actually made people cut back their patios?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying with that close and construction tolerances and everything, and
I wish they'd all be 100 square feet less than
Well,
the requirement,
I mean,
because it would make it
2.5
very
square
easy.
feet is nothing. Okay.
Commissioner Lee.
Chris, do you know the existing height of the house right now?
I don't, and we wouldn't have that information.
Okay, so maybe the applicant will know. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Forrest.
A follow-up on that one, and this may be for the proponent as well. Looking at the elevations on the survey here, it looks like generously we could say that the surrounding ground level is around 897 feet. And then the peak height of the, it says peak height elevation, maybe they're doing midpoint, I'm not sure, is 919.2, so that would be, if it was ridgeline, if that's what they're referring to, then that's only 22-foot height versus 30. So I don't know if you have that information or the builder could provide that.
I would have the builder
Okay,
address that.
thanks.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, Chris. At this time, we'd invite the applicant to come forward and tell us about the project. Mr. Busey. So let's get you a handheld mic, because that one doesn't work so well.
My name is Scott Busen with Great Neighborhood Homes, and I'm representing Nicole and Brian Schmidt on their new home at 5300 Oaklawn Avenue. I think I can get this to come up on the screen here in some shape or form. But thanks again for the time tonight. We have built approximately 40 homes in East Edina. This is just a map to show kind of this concentrated area we're looking at right now. You can see Oaklawn and 54th, and we built several homes within this neighborhood in East Edina. One of our the philosophies of our business is building homes that fit within the neighborhood and maintaining neighborhood scale. But this is the first time of all these 40 homes that we've come to you for a variance. So we do realize how important how rare variances should be, but it's the first time we've come for a single-family home for a variance. And we really think this one is very appropriate for the home and for the neighborhood. The one thing I like to talk about is the home, just to call out here, the home is, if you look at it here, one thing, if you look at the new ordinances that went in place that you drafted, this home really takes advantage of that and is really showing you the fruits of that. We've got, for example, the non-clipped sidewall, so it's limited to a 30-foot height, but you can see we can keep the straight wall character of the homes in the neighborhood, and like you would see, whereas before the ordinance we had to clip the side. So by keeping the height to 30 feet, we're using that new ordinance that you put in place. And then secondly, also the sidewall articulation. That's another point you guys drafted. There's a great example of how that really makes a house have more character. So I just want to call that out, that this is a home that's taking advantage of those new ordinances there. And looking at, if the development is reasonable, I think that one of the things when you read about a reasonable use or practical difficulties, you have to look at not just zoning, but also functional and aesthetic difficulties. And that's something that this home, in building a home for the Schmidts here, we want to provide them with a reasonable use. And for them, it's really critical that they have a backyard for their small children. And that's something when, the garage right now is 5 feet from the lot line at 53rd, which the lot line is 18 feet from the street. So that's about a 23-foot driveway there, which is much wider. I do think that's a little tight, so that's why we pushed it to 10 feet from the lot line. So then with the 18-foot setback, you've got a 28-foot driveway there. Although we're bringing it narrower in an effort to reduce the impervious surface of that really wide driveway that's there right now. So, the reasonable use they have is really trying to maintain, a backyard for their children, so they're not having to play in the street. And secondly, there's also a large tree behind the garage. And if we look at the staff report talked about, there are ways to build a garage that would meet zoning. One of them would be pushing it to the 20-foot setback, which would eliminate their backyard potential, or having it at 15 feet and having the garage door face the rear yard. The problem with that would be the tree that's there. It's not the one here. There's a large tree behind the house. Let me see if I can find that here. That's not it. Oops, that's not it. Bear with me. I can show you on the survey here. Here, that's the one here. So here's the tree back here that if they have that garage face the rear, that tree would have to come out. So we're trying to maintain that bur oak tree that's there. And there's also, you can just see a glimpse, there's a white pine, a large white pine there too that we want to maintain. So for them to have that garage face the rear would require that tree to come out. So, again, that's a practical difficulty that exists on the site, that they want to maintain the maximum amount of trees they can there. And then the third problem with moving that garage to the 20-foot setback was it reduces the amount of drainage behind the home, in between the new attached garage and the home to the south. So that's one of the, look in the staff report, the engineer did say that the report or that the proposed plan is best for drainage. So if we push that garage towards to the 20-foot setback, it would reduce the amount of percolation in the backyard area between that garage and the house to the south there. So those are reasons why the development, going to a different type of development that Chris had mentioned had been done in the neighborhood, would create a lot of practical difficulties for the applicant: the backyard, the tree issue, and the drainage. There are homes, it is correct, that were built that were at the 20-foot setback recently or remodeled in the neighborhood, and I went and looked at those, and it was pretty evident to me that those homes the garage was at 20 feet, but as you can see here, it created practical difficulties for the owners because they ended up building patios within the side yard setback. I don't know if those are conforming, if we're allowed to do patio on the side yard setback.
Are you referring to the side street setback?
Yes.
No, that should
Okay.
be 15 feet too.
So here's a good example of a recent home that was built where, they went to the 20-foot, but they obviously had practical difficulties, so they went ahead and built a non-conforming patio in the side yard there. And then another one here, another one, same situation, garage with a 20-foot setback, but as you can see, they couldn't get to the backyard, so they built a patio within the side yard setback. And then one more. Let's see if I can find that one here. Oops. Here's another one here as well. So you can see this patio is well within the side yard. It's almost to the curb. So of the only examples I could see of newer construction that was built compliantly with the garage set to 20 feet did create a lot of practical difficulties for the occupant and force them to build non-compliant patios. So we're just trying to have more of a balance by getting the garage further away from the street, which I think is good. It gives more room for parking, keeping the garage away from the neighbor to the south, and doing it in the way we can protect those trees that are there in the backyard. And I think also, impervious surface is really important. It's something we need to be looking at as a city. And I think having, the shortest possible driveway would just reduce the amount of water shedding. Because no matter how good of a erosion control stormwater plan that I do, I can't, that rain hitting that concrete, it's just going to go right into the storm sewer. So we think this is a way to also protect the infrastructure of the city. It is one thing to call out. This is a very common site plan. Of all the side load garages that I looked at in this neighborhood, oops, why bad with this thing tonight? Let's see if I got it here. I could not find one that was 20 feet other than those three new ones that I showed you with the side patio. So here's the homes. This is from my surveyor. So 5301 Oak Lawn, which is across the street in Oak Lawn, is at 10 and looks fine. 5301 Kellogg is the house behind us or west on the corner. That's about 6.5. Directly across the street, their garage does face the rear, but that garage is at 4 feet from the lot line. So those are the adjacent four homes near us. But then when you pull to the wider radius of the whole neighborhood, these are all the setbacks of the side load streets, side load garages. As you can see, they're all, most of them are well below 20-foot setback. So it's a real common site plan, and most of these had variances, by the way. Both the home that we're removing at 5300 Oak Lawn and the one to the west of us on 5301 Kellogg, one across the street, all had variances for the similar side yard setback. If you look back in the files over the past, maybe 20-some years. So it is very common. And I think it's because it's what is the right balance for the homes in the neighborhood. We had a neighbor meeting. We sent out the survey, the plans to neighbors within 300 feet. Had a neighbor meeting, had good attendance. There were several, I think, several emails you should have received from neighbors that liked the balance of what we're doing there. So with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Busen. Questions for Mr. Busen? Commissioner Carr.
Well, I compliment the effort to save the trees in the back. I noticed that in the front of the house, is that an oak in the front of the house?
Yep.
And it appears that, well, it's certainly not in the drawings. Will that be removed?
So the tree in there, I pulled up, this is a survey you don't have in your packet, but this is a survey where, the house is shifted a little bit more back. And one of the things we struggled with when we did this site plan was I've had several arborists come to me about that front tree, and several have told me it's just too close to the house, so that you're going to cut into the roots and it's going to have a hard time surviving. However, I was there again with another guy this morning, and I said, what do you think? I mean, he said it's like an 80-year-old tree. It's got kind of not a real wide drip line. It's survived with the house close to it now. So I said, well, if I shifted that was 5 feet, is there potential that we could keep it? And he said, possibly, but there's never guarantees on that. So, it's something I think, if the variance was granted, Brian and Nicole would consider an effort to try to shift it to save that front tree too. It's just
to shift the tree.
Shift the survey. the house.
Shift this house, okay, shift the house.
Right, so if you
Okay,
see
how would you
here-
shift that?
Just 5 feet back. So you see here, here's where we pushed it back 5 feet. And you can see the front porch clears it. If you went by right now, the tree is about 5 feet from the house. So if we shifted it back, we could possibly clear it. Because it is a tree that, we'd like to keep if we could. It's just the reality of hearing different arborists tell me it's just, it's so close to the existing house. But
So would you be adverse to having a condition be that you either move the house back 5 feet or replace that tree with another oak tree? I mean, that whole neighborhood is filled with oak trees.
Oh, yeah.
And because of the construction, they continue to be torn down. And so the effort underway is to try to replace those trees with another oak, of the same type of oak, assuming it's not one that's susceptible to oak disease, but replace it with another oak of a sufficient diameter so that we continue to maintain that oak canopy in the neighborhood.
yeah, I think I'd have to consult with Brian and Nicole, but they're not in their head, so I think they'd be interested in that. And I have a picture here of a house we just finished at 5513 Oak Lawn. And this house was built almost as close to a large elm as the proposed project. And as you can see, this is a picture I took today. Lots of leaves down on the ground. And we were able to save that through perimeter fencing, keeping the backhoe up from driving on the roots, convincing the homeowner to keep the tree. That's sometimes, but I think here's an example where I think how the house looks, with the tree still there. So that's like the biggest elm on the block, I think.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Platter.
Just adding on to the tree comment a little bit. So notwithstanding the front one, which you've talked about, would there also be a condition that the other 2 large oak trees would remain? Is that right? You're planning on keeping those?
In the front? Oh, yeah.
The front, way in the front on Oak Lawn, and then there's the one behind the proposed garage.
Yes.
I don't know how far behind there.
Yes, definitely. That could be a condition because we want to keep those trees. So.
Okay.
I mean, Oak Lawn is really like the oak. It's like a canopy over the street.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And then I just had a question, and I don't remember when I was there. There's one in the back, I guess on the south side. Do you know if that's on the lot you're talking about or on the lot to the south? If I'm looking at my pictures, there's definitely something also back there, and unfortunately I didn't get a...
Here's the bur oak here.
Right.
And then these are white pines.
Yep.
Here. So these are pretty nice trees. These white pines are healthy and green and tall. And
Go to your south property line, though. In the middle of the property, roughly.
Right here.
Isn't there another oak tree?
There is an oak here that is diseased.
Okay.
That is going to come out there.
I mean, it'd be helpful to show that on the survey, right? If it's there in existing condition.
Yeah, I'll show you the existing condition. Let's see here. Sorry. I've got the existing here somewhere. There's the burrow. I showed you that tree there. So here, I've got a picture of this tree actually. Here's this one here. There's the tree there that's behind the existing house.
So that's on the south property line?
Yep. No, it's about 10 feet in.
10 feet in.
Yep, and see it's got a lot of rot there, and then the top of it's flagging considerably. These are all leaves are here, but this whole upper part's flagging. So he said that tree's already kind of on the way out before you even started.
Got that. It just would be helpful to have on the
Yep.
existing surveys.
Yeah, I'll show you that. I got that
See
here.
all that.
Yep, here it is. Oops, sorry. He doesn't have that on here. It's right here in this area.
Okay.
There's the existing survey.
That'd be nice to have too, wouldn't it?
All right, other questions? Commissioner Lee.
Scott, I just want to piggyback off of Commissioner Carr. I thank you for giving us a little bit of that initial, your findings. I think that's really helpful for us to get a context. One thing we've been discussing is that sometimes it's very difficult for us to kind of tell just from our packets what's really going on, and some applicants do a better job than others as far as conveying what the issues are. I think visually, graphically, as much as you can do. Sounds like you do a lot of work here in Edina, and it looks like you do good work. So I always just want to, give you something to take away in any way. For example, that existing survey would be helpful, and maybe it was part of the packet. I don't know, but it didn't end up in our final packet. Also, like to see the photographs that you had were really good as far as showing what the surrounding neighbors are. Their conditions, because again, it's all about context. So I really appreciate that.
Sure.
You're raising the existing first floor by a foot approximately, and I just wondered, can you tell me what the floor-to-floor heights are going to be? I know ultimately you're aiming to top out at the 30-foot mark, but can you tell me the existing house right now? What are the floor-to-floor heights, and what do you plan on having?
So the existing house is the standard 8-1 ceilings on the first floor and 8 foot on the second floor. It's pretty common. Basement's probably 7 feet. So we do a poured foundation. A concrete form is 10 feet. So you take out the footing and the slab, and we do what's called a top cord bearing truss. So we hang the first floor truss inside the foundation so it doesn't stick up. That's about a 9-inch cord. So you'll have a first floor that'll be mostly hidden in the foundation, and then the first floor in this house will be 9.6, and the second floor will be the 8.1, with the goal of having a 30-foot peak on the house.
Okay. And do you know the height of the existing house?
The existing house is a 2-story colonial. I don't have the exact ridge, but when you're just measuring, the floor systems, 2 8-foot floor systems and 16, 17, 18 with the floor, 2 floor systems, 2 8-foot ceilings, and then a colonial about a 12 pitch. You've got almost a 28-foot ridge there right now, 27, 28.
So
it's a tall home. It's a big home now, actually.
Yeah,
the home is pretty massive from the side. And
yep, full-story, boxy, two-story colonial. Okay, so you're guessing it's at least 28 feet in that range?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about the material that you're using? We had a sort of a verbal or a written description on the, I guess that would be the west elevation?
So this home here...
east elevation.
Yes, this is the east elevation of the home. What you see here is, really it's really what I would call a more traditional farmhouse colonial style. And so what we'll have here is a base of a wainscot of stone, like a Chilton type stone you can see on the columns here, and also will face the porch, and then it'll wrap around the house here with a wainscot all the way around here. So you have a nice foundation, base like you'd have on an old house. And then we have siding would be a lap siding. Probably a James Hardy 4 to 6 inch exposure lap siding. We use corner caps rather than those vertical boards. I think that mitered corner looks more in character with the neighborhood. Divided light windows, which are again, what you find in an older home here. Asphalt roof, and they've got a standing seam metal roof here. It potentially could be asphalt on the sheds on the top. The sheds are, you won't typically see that, so they may end up just going with asphalt on that, but probably a shed type roof here, because we've got embedded dormers here. And so I need a metal, soldered metal seal on this whole front part to prevent water there. And then we cure on the side, and we'll put some shutters on there, some period shutters. Nice big window box here facing 53rd. And again, a lot of doors and, different, I think the house has a very welcoming look. That was something Nicole and Brian were really adamant about. They want a house that people want to approach, so it's got the wraparound porch here, and they give up a lot of square footage in the house for that porch. We had meetings about it to be the pantry or the powder room, that takes the hit, for the porch. So carriage-style garage door with the panels and the divided lights that you'd see there, so.
Okay. I think the standing seam material might have been what threw me off a little bit. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but...
Copper or metal?
Yeah. Just, this is a personal comment, then I think by the introduction of that material on the front and not incorporating it around the corner makes it almost look like it's two different buildings, but I'll leave that up to your discretion. I kind of prefer the simplicity of just staying with the standard materials, asphalt roofing, maybe not introducing another one, but, again...
That's a fair challenge. It's possible that we could consider that with, like a...
Sure.
You often see a cedar shake roof with a copper pan under the windows there, so I think what they wanted to add a little fresh twist, to a traditional home.
Yep.
You are seeing homes, not necessarily just being period completely, are starting to bring in some more modern materials. I think if you keep it in scale and proportion, it can really work.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Busen? All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
So this is a public hearing, and at this time I'll open the public hearing and invite members of the public who are in attendance to come forward and share your thoughts about the project. If you can just come to one of the side microphones and give us your name and address and let us know what you're thinking.
My name is Barbara, Barbara Whalen. I'm at 5301 Kellogg. It's the house directly behind.
Welcome,
Actually,
Ms. Whalen.
I had some questions originally about setback. I went back and forth, but now I understand that because I didn't realize that we had an 18-foot boulevard, I guess, but I don't know what you would call it. So the 10-feet driveway sounded much closer than it is, but I was out there with my measuring tape and measuring my own driveway. So actually I'm here in support of the variance at this point because the alternatives really would encroach a lot, from my personal perspective, would encroach a lot more on my property than this variance would. This driveway is going to be further back. If he comes, as I say, if he goes back 20 feet, that driveway is going to be like an airport landing strip. If he has to go in the back, that again is going to be a very long driveway closer to my property. So as far as I'm concerned, this is really less intrusive. I dislike having to do variances. I mean, I think we have rules for a reason. But if you go down that street, they are all close. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to park my car there. Now I know that because it doesn't clear. But we haven't ticketed yet. So it really is in keeping. As I said, I was concerned initially because I just had to measure. A couple of people had given me incorrect measurements.
You weren't alone.
One thing that did strike me, though, now is that this talk about 5 feet back to save that oak tree makes me wonder about the oak tree in the back. There's an oak tree along the... I don't think you can save both of them. Personally, I'd rather have the one in the back, but that's... But anyway, that just kind of came up when he talked about the 5 foot. It doesn't make sense to me how you could move that back and then save that tree. So I think that's all I have to say. But it is very much in keeping with what's there. Now, if you don't like what's there, I guess that's different. But that street is just with all of the houses are fairly close. And what makes it more attractive, normally you think of setback being more attractive, but what makes that more attractive is very short driveways. You don't have that expanse because you've got driveway after driveway after driveway. And if they were all 25 feet long, I don't think that would be as attractive. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whalen. And I want you to know I did get the email communications that you were having
that was
with
quite
staff.
an exchange,
But,
wasn't
yeah,
it?
so it got to me late in the
Chris
day.
was extremely patient with my question.
I appreciate your diligent investigation.
Well, it was just bothering me because I'm measuring 24 feet and I'm hearing 14 feet and I'm thinking something isn't right.
You were raising many of the questions I think those of us up here
But once
were
I
thinking
understood
about.
it, that made me able to support really the variance because the setback will be fine as far as I'm concerned. Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you for being here.
Hello, I'm Brian Schmidt. My wife is here too, Nicole Schmidt.
Welcome, Mr. Schmidt.
The residents to the property. We have 3 kids, 8, 6, and 2. And, I guess I don't want to cover, Scott covered everything, I think, so I'll keep it brief. But it's a really cool neighborhood with the character. And I think we spent a lot of time kind of debating who to use for a builder and how to approach that. And I think what Scott does is he maintains the character of the neighborhood when he builds, and we spent a lot of time and effort trying to do that in the build plan. And I think that's true. That's our intent when we complete this project. And then the second part of it is what makes that neighborhood cool is the trees. If you take the trees down, it looks like it just doesn't have the same feel. So our intent is to make sure that we can keep all those trees in the property. Of course, there's one that one by the patio that's not doing well. I think is going to have to come out, but our intent is to find a way to try to fit that property in there the best way possible and work with tree experts to make sure we can preserve those, because I think that's part of the character of that neighborhood, and that's what we want.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Other comments? All right, seeing none, I'd take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
In a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Public hearing is closed. We'll return the discussion to the commission. Comments, discussion? Commissioner Olson.
I just wanted to, I like what you've done, with the design and the location of it and saving the trees. I like that you've improved the drainage and also reduced the impervious coverage with the driveway. And I think that meeting the setback would be more of a, detriment to the neighborhood too, and to the tree and just everything. So I'm supporting this.
Commissioner Forrest.
What's the length of a standard parking space for our commercial projects? 18 feet? Pardon?
18 feet.
So those are 18 feet, and that's, okay. I was wondering, and I'm sorry I didn't think of this while you were up there, but Mr. Busen, are you excavating beneath the garage as well?
Why don't you,
Well,
Scott, if you can come back up.
A full basement type excavation. And I'm asking this question in relation to the tree.
The garage will have a frost footing, so a 48-inch frost footing, and then underneath, so we won't have to go down as far.
Okay, because when I look at these trees, it sounds like the front one is beautiful and a larger tree, but it's also iffy as to whether or not it could be preserved even moving back 5 feet, whereas the rear one is identified specifically as a bur oak, which is more resistant to oak wilt as well. So I personally, if I were gambling on it, I would probably work to keep the setbacks, the front and back the way they are right now.
Yeah, I agree the front one's a challenge.
I think that's it for my questions. Other than that, the number on that ridge height thing, or that was on the survey of 19.2, I think that was a different interpretation of peak height. So
the ridge peak has to be 30 feet above the average existing grade in the front that will be held to.
Okay. And what is that number? Is it about
8? I have to look at the survey.
I have 897 as a generous.
Yeah, 897
somewhere
is
in
it.
there.
It's it. Yep, it's kind of the line kind of cuts. It sort of goes towards the street as you head north.
Yeah, okay. Good. Thanks.
Other comments or discussion? Commissioner Platter.
So inclined, I'd like to make a recommendation to approve this in not agreeing with the staff recommendation for this. And does the staff have any conditions, assuming we would approve it, to add? Or your typical list?
In support
In support.
of a variance? it would be in keeping with many of the setbacks of garages that are existing there today. It would be an improvement upon an existing non-conforming situation that is the existing house there right now. It's much closer. It would also preserve a tree, the significant tree in the rear is the one that you were looking for, and I think Carrie might have.
These are along the lines of findings, if you're looking for it. Practical difficulty could be the large right-of-way out in front, the existence of the mature trees and working to save that. And Chris mentioned the reasonable use about it's consistent with existing garages in the neighborhood. As far as conditions go, it will be subject to the plans as submitted and date stamped
I know.
as
You
presented
have a
this evening.
fair list on there, and I
Right.
don't know that offhand. I don't want to miss it either, so along with that. Having said that, I also like to make a condition that the 3 pine trees on the west side of the property be preserved, as well as the oak trees on the far east and the far west be preserved. And then if the one at the front, kind of the mid-range one, if that has to go away, that replacement tree be planted for that one. Replacement oak tree be planted. And I think the applicant was agreeing to all that, right?
Commissioner Carr, then Commissioner Forrest.
And I would further, if this would be acceptable to you.
I'm sorry, were you? Was that a motion?
Oh, yeah,
then,
that's a motion.
then before
Sorry,
you go,
it's
let me
not
see.
appropriate.
Let me get a second to that motion.
I second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Now further discussion, Commissioner Carr.
And I would like to further amend that motion to require the applicant to put fencing around the trees to protect the trees. To the extent, is the root zone, is that what it's called?
Well,
The drip zone, there's 2 different zones. I know there's.
the watershed district has requirements for this, so that may be an appropriate way to reflect that. I mean, I'm assuming this is subject for a watershed permit. They're moving over 50 cubic.
You could add that condition subject to watershed district approval.
Okay, so you're saying that, again, fencing and protection of the tree in accordance with watershed district
Correct.
Guidelines. So I would add that as a condition. Also, in talking to the city forester yesterday, Tom, and I don't recall his last name, I apologize, Tom, if you're listening, but he mentioned that the most significant thing that you can do, because it's very difficult to avoid compaction in a construction area, but the most important thing to do to protect trees is what's called tree aeration. And similar to what you've done on a golf course, where you're aerated with maybe 3-inch punches into the ground, a tree aeration system is a deeper hole dug into the ground. Because of the compaction caused by construction, there is no way for air or moisture to get to the tree roots. So I would also recommend and add that as a condition that tree aeration be conducted after the construction is concluded.
So are those recommendations amenable to the mover and the seconder?
Yes, if I could just paraphrase them.
Yes.
To try so that tree protection is subject to watershed district requirements, and then the trees also be aerated after construction is complete.
Okay. And the seconder?
I agree with that.
All right. Further discussion, Commissioner Forrest.
Well, I disagree with trying to save both trees. I don't think it's going to be possible because of what oaks are. And, you said both trees.
No. I said
Pines.
these trees, and if this one has to go, that they're replaceable for.
Okay, I was listening. Okay, I misunderstood you then. I guess what I would like is to have at least one of those trees then replaced with a larger caliper, spaded in oak, and I don't even have to stick with the oak thing as much as I love oaks, because sometimes it's better to have a diversity of trees on your property. But I would say like at least a 3-inch caliper replacement tree. That I would also like to ensure that just because it's a big point here that we discussed, that it's plans as submitted, but we don't have the final dimensions of the plans, so that the lot coverage will not exceed what was provided on the survey. So that it will be at least, about 2.5 square feet less than what the maximum is. And
Well, I mean, it says in conformance with the plans.
we don't have dimensions on the plans.
We have a
She said she didn't get 'em yet.
proposed site plan with the square footage. I mean,
We have the square footage identified, right?
How
but
could
we
it
don't
be
have,
more? How could it be more than 2250 if it says it's 2247 on the plans?
Well, it's more than 2247, and that's almost like he was saying. It's just it's pretty close. So I agree. If you don't want that in the findings, fine. But I think it's a point that we've discussed up here quite
Right.
much because
No, I
it's
get the
very, very
importance of
close.
it, yeah.
And we do an as-built survey, so I think that's a good way to ensure it as well. But I just want to make sure that that calculation is done when we receive the as-built survey. And maybe that's putting it on the staff then to do that. So yeah, for me, I wanted to add that there be a large caliber oak or other hardwood replaced, but that was my
All right,
preference.
so is that additional condition acceptable to the mover?
If I understand it, it's to have at least a 3-inch caliper replacement for the oak if it gets removed, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. The Christmas tree grows. All right, other discussion on the motion. I just want to say, and it's a little bit of reiteration of Commissioner Lee's point, and I don't know whose issue it is, but I kind of came in a little skeptical about this one. And I have to say, Mr. Busen, your presentation was very persuasive, and you identified a lot of facts. I would add to what's been discussed the stormwater infiltration points that you made, that we're going to have less hard cover, we're going to have more place for water to infiltrate. And so I think you make a very good case, and I'm prepared to support the motion. But we somehow, if we could convey that better in writing when it gets to us, it would be, and I don't know how that happens. I know, Mr. Busen, the good news is you rarely come in for variances. So if this was your first, then it's understandable. But to the extent we can convey more of this in writing ahead of time, it'll make our job a little easier. On an unrelated point, I will say that I appreciate you pointing out the consequences of the work that we did about a year ago on setbacks and height. And I really like the design because we don't have to step in, 5 feet just because we're going above a certain point. And I think I think it turned out really great that way. We give up a little height in order to get an alternative design that fits better in the neighborhood, and the side yard articulation is terrific, and I just think it ends up being a very nice product. So, did you have any further point, Commissioner Platter? Okay. All right, is there further discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, next up is where we go. Comprehensive Plan Amendment, Sidewalk Facilities Plan. Mr. Nolan, welcome. Oh, sure. Was that upstairs? Or oh, yeah, why don't you give it to her?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I am going to be pulling the lens back a little bit. We've been talking about some pretty specific site planning issues, and we're going to be talking about a citywide plan. I'm here to give a brief presentation regarding the Sidewalk Facilities Plan, Comprehensive Plan Amendment. So why would staff be recommending this comprehensive plan amendment? Well, first of all, it was requested by City Council, but I also like to think of this as a continuation over the past several years of resident desires, council policies, and active living efforts. And so looking at last year's quality of life survey, 73% of residents indicated that Edina needs more sidewalks. And the very recent, somewhat preliminary results from the Park and Recs community survey that happened this month, 85% of respondents indicated that their primary need, or they have a need for walking and biking trails in the city, and half of those respondents indicated that particular need as their number one need from the Park and Rec system and from the city. In 2011 to 2013, the Do Town effort engaged residents in a conversation about a healthier community, and in fact, hundreds, if not thousands, of residents signed up to be champions of active living in the city of Edina. In December 2012, the Pedestrian and Cyclist Safety Fund was created, franchise fees that contribute to a fund that allowed the city to fund non-motorized transportation infrastructure in the city. Therefore, residents are no longer assessed for pedestrian improvements like sidewalks. In August of last year, the City Council unanimously approved this Living Streets policy. We'll talk about that in a minute. And staff is currently drafting the Living Streets implementation plan. Briefly, the timeline of this particular process. On October 3rd, the Sidewalk Facilities Plan and the text that you also had in your packet, along with the matrix of criteria, was published for public comment on Speak Up Edina with various outreach efforts surrounding that. October 7th, that packet was included in the City Council's packet. I received that packet on that date, so they were able to have on hand what the public was seeing. October 22nd, this evening, meeting with the Planning Commission for a public hearing. October 27th, the public comment period will close in terms of that Speak Up Edina site, so we can gather data and present that as part of the City Council's public hearing on November 3rd for their potential vote to approve for the comprehensive plan amendment. There's another public hearing that's going to happen on that date. And then after that, the required review periods for adjacent review, and then also Met Council's 60-day review period. What's in front of you now here is the facilities plan, the sidewalk facilities plan from the current or 2008 comprehensive plan. That plan was created prior to, obviously, the active living efforts that I was just describing and prior to the Living Streets policy. And actually, this plan, from what I understand, the sidewalk plan was in place for several years prior to the creation or update of the 2008 comprehensive plan. At that time, the evaluation categories focused on school, park, and activity center walking zones and were somewhat subjective, and that plan was created about 6 years ago, and several officials decided that it's time to update that plan. So in the effort to update the sidewalk facilities plan really came out of the Living Streets policy and planning activities, and the approved Living Streets policy and the revised sidewalk plan is in front of you right now. The policy states that sidewalks are required on all arterial and collector streets and where streets abut a public school, public building, community playfield, or neighborhood park. So building on the Living Streets policy and from input from council, boards and commissions, residents and staff, the sidewalk facilities plan update indicates that sidewalks are required at public schools, public buildings and parks. These are streets that meet these criteria. On both sides of minor arterial streets, on at least one side of collector streets, and as required by zoning code or plan approval. And then otherwise optional sidewalks can also be considered required according to some context criteria that I will talk about here. So the context criteria, first and foremost, recommended sidewalks that are recommended by our adopted and approved active routes to school plan. Those are the sidewalks that are in blue on the plan. Staff considers those higher priority sidewalks, so when opportunities arise to implement those projects, we will take advantage of those. Also, if a street is near a park or commercial destination, and streets that have average daily traffic greater than 500 vehicles per day, and with 85th percentile speeds greater, or 85th percentile speeds greater than 30 miles per hour. These last couple of bullets deal with pedestrian safety on our streets. Some additional context criteria that can be considered: if there is a history of crashes involving pedestrians, those streets have transit stops. They serve as logical connections between pedestrian destinations. There could exist poor sight lines or lighting, et cetera, on those streets, and streets that are particularly narrow that may not be accommodating for pedestrians to share the road with vehicles. And the matrix that's shown, I'm not going to get into detail about this, but that matrix that was provided in your packet and what's shown on the screen here shows all of the sidewalks that are on the plan that are on local streets and how they meet those various criteria. We're not showing the sidewalks that are on collectors and arterials because those, by definition, in this plan are required. I just blew up part of the plan a little bit around Redison Park in the northwest quadrant, just to briefly discuss what those different sidewalk types are in the plan. So the future state aid sidewalks, those are sidewalks on our state aid streets in the brown dashed line. Those sidewalks are funded 80% with state aid funds and 20% pedestrian and cyclist safety funds. I discussed earlier the future active routes to school sidewalks, again in blue.
I'm sorry, Mark, can I just interrupt for a second? You said the brown, the dotted line, or is it the solid?
It's, the colors are a little bit similar. The solid orange lines are existing sidewalks. Thank you, Chair.
So could you maybe with the cursor point to where the future state aid, there you go.
So here's one here on Valley View. The sidewalks on state aid streets are funded differently, so they're indicated differently on the plan.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Okay. The blue are active routes to school sidewalks, again funded by PACS funds, and also any opportunities we get to get grants. That applies to any sidewalks that we construct through the county or through the state or federal funding. And then future city sidewalks, those are the red dashed lines. Those sidewalks don't meet either of those first two criteria, but they meet the criteria we discussed earlier regarding traffic and even whether it's on arterials or collectors, depending on if they're state aid streets or not. As I mentioned earlier, we have been receiving public input on Speak Up Edina. As of the midday today, we'd received about 40 comments since October 3rd, and all those comments are supportive of sidewalks. Many of them are residents requesting sidewalks on their individual streets, folks just expressing support of sidewalks, and then some adding some additional criteria we may want to consider. Some of those include trees, population density, and some other things. Staff received a couple of emails today from residents that live on the same street that objected to their street getting a sidewalk. But outside of those two emails and this public input, that's what we've received so far in terms of comment on the plan.
Have those emails been forwarded to us as part of our materials?
They were. You didn't get those out?
Okay.
Okay. And really to wrap it up, I just wanted to state that the sidewalk facilities plan, again, is really based on approved city policy. It's data-driven. One might argue that it's a fairly conservative plan, where this plan, as you see in front of you, looks to increase our existing sidewalk facilities in terms of linear feet by 50% over the long-term process of a comprehensive plan, 20, 30 years. So we've got about 78 miles of sidewalk in the city right now, and this plan looks to add potentially an additional 36,000 miles, 38,000 miles. And I would like to also indicate that if a sidewalk doesn't appear on a street, that doesn't mean that in the future it can't be considered for a sidewalk. Streets, context can change, traffic counts can change in the future, so streets could be considered in the future for a sidewalk, and of course residents can petition for a sidewalk. All the processes that we have right now might require sidewalks later to be placed on our streets. That's what I have for my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Questions for Mr. Nolan? Commissioner Forrest.
You mentioned population density, and could you speak to that as to me, with all of the developments that we're getting currently with multifamily housing and stuff, I know that we try to emphasize to developers that they're going to be responsible for additional sidewalks at times, but my concern is in those areas, I think a lot of those areas already have sidewalks, but I like the idea of awareness, especially when you get more and more dedicated senior housing as well. So can you think offhand of any areas where that might be more of an issue?
With population density, I'm thinking mostly in terms of the Southdale area, and those roadways, most of them, if they don't have sidewalks, they are in the sidewalk plan by nature of there being collectors and arterials. So I think if development continues to be focused on some of those streets that can handle the increased traffic and demand, I think that's where population density could factor in. I think looking at population density it could be an interesting way of, as an overlay onto the plan to see where sidewalks are compared to where the densities are right now. And that's something that we haven't done yet, but we have considered.
Commissioner Platter.
Yeah, I was kind of going to make that same point on, if denser areas are ones that are either dense now or Southdale area, which, what things are happening there. And then also, pathways to public transportation. Mm-hmm. I forget, did we look actually to get to bus stops and things? Was that on our plan when these were gone through and added sidewalks? I'm trying to remember that.
The transit stops were not on the plans that were shown to the Living Streets Advisory Group and this and the commission here a couple of months
that's
ago.
maybe a suggestion that we put the bus stops on there to make sure those are accommodated the best we can. Not just getting to the public transportation, but also and it's like you said, it's happening at Southdale now, but getting to that commercial node or that area where people could easier walk to than having to take a car there if there are those connections. Mm-hmm. It's some things happening on France Avenue and those other areas too. And then just a question on, and I read through the Speak Up Edina, and yeah, there's all were positive, and there's actually a lot that actually ask for a sidewalk on their street or an area. How is that taken into account? Is the staff going to go back through and look at those areas and maybe suggest some from those comments, or how would that all come together? I'm just curious.
We do plan to bring those in at the end of that comment period and talk about those streets and those recommendations and look at those compared to some of the criteria that I discussed tonight in terms of traffic counts and speeds and find out if there's some correlation there.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think this is at least in my mind, it's a great thing to have, and it's a great thing that our city is progressing towards more options for people to move around, and sidewalks a key part of that in my mind. So I think it's a great thing to support, and hopefully it goes well.
Commissioner Carr.
I just want to compliment you on all the hard work that's gone into this. I think it's a great idea to amend the comprehensive plan to include sidewalks. This is long-term planning at its best and really is going to make the city a lot more attractive and livable. So thank you for all the hard work.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Seeley.
So my understanding is that one of the primary motivations in increasing the amount of sidewalks that exist in Edina is the safety of pedestrians. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, that's one consideration.
Okay.
Sure.
So bearing that in mind, the motivation that has previously contributed to this, do we have any kind of empirical evidence suggesting that pedestrians are unsafe without sidewalks? Like, statistics on crashes involving pedestrians, anything that would be solved with the existence of a sidewalk?
There are studies that do show, depending on the street type and speeds involved with particular streets, that's pedestrians are safer off the street.
Okay.
I can't recall those individually right now.
That's totally fine.
Sure.
Sure, thank you.
Commissioner Olson.
Well, I agree. This is excellent. I think the last time you were here with Living Streets, I was surprised we didn't have something like this already in place. So this is excellent. And I've got to put my reading glasses on. So I saw in your presentation you did kind of define the funding for the city sidewalks. Do we think we need to add that in? So we mention it here, financing for state aid and active routes. Should we mention in there too? Is that important to have that it's 100% PAC too? In the text? I don't know.
In the text itself?
Yeah. Or with that?
We can certainly do that. I think at the time the text was prepared, staff was still mulling over with the MSA streets, the 80-20
Yeah.
split with, because that's
Right.
how we assess our residents for those streets. And so we decided just recently before the Valley View project, for example, that was in front of council last night, to move to an 80-20 split.
Okay.
So that's something that we can certainly consider putting
Okay,
in
I
the
think
comp plan.
to be consistent, I think that might be good to
Mhm.
have that as a reference. And so, where the sidewalks are required, and again, I'm kind of new to this, so apologize if you guys have gone through this 1,000 times, but the context criteria, who is going to be looking at that and kind of applying to say, oh, you're meeting one or more of those, or is that?
That's the engineering staff.
Okay.
And it's something that I think we will look at on a year-by-year basis when projects come up and neighborhood projects
Sure.
come up. Not just if sidewalks are in the comprehensive plan, which is a
Right.
major reason for doing this, so those future projects can be laid against what's in the approved plan, but looking at collecting more data on those streets that don't have that
Okay,
data.
great. So, because some of them are a little, subjective, so I guess, like sight lines, roadway, geometry. I think they're all great things to be meeting. It might be kind of hard to say, well, that is one or not, or meets that criteria or not, but clearly I always like things really defined so we can easily apply them. Let's see what else. I think this is great. Do you think there will also be graphics that kind of illustrate what the sidewalk and the boulevard, those different options would be? Or?
Those graphics and in the more detail that Commissioner Platter was talking about, that's going to reside in the Living Streets Plan, which will also be referenced and amended in sorts into the comprehensive plan. So there's a pedestrian facilities component of that plan, which will talk in more detail. This is simply dealing with sidewalks because that's the way our current comprehensive plan is
organized. Okay, and then that will
organized.
refer to it
Right.
once. Okay. Great, that's all I had. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Lee. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Platter. And
So
then
the Living Streets piece will be coming after this?
Right after,
Yeah, so this was a piece of that, but because it's the comp plan, they wanted to get that out there sooner.
And is the plan for the Living Streets policy to get incorporated into the comp plan?
That's, I think, still a discussion, right?
It is, yes, and we do still want actually to bring that in front of this commission as well.
Because we'd need to do a public hearing to amend the comp
Yes.
plan
Right.
if we were going to, okay, but that's not what we're doing tonight. It's
No,
just
that's
the
not.
sidewalk portion.
So it would probably be a policy update to the comprehensive plan, right? Living Streets, I think that's where we're heading
Correct.
on that versus actual ordinance.
Okay. Commissioner Lee.
A question about the map. So we have the sidewalk facilities, figure 7.10. Can you tell me how that the collector versus arterial factors into this? I have a feeling it's embedded in sort of your other categories of dashes and colors, but this map doesn't. Is there an easy way to distinguish which ones are arterial and which ones are collector?
There aren't, but in the comprehensive plan, that is indicated in another graphic, which I could have supplied along with this one to make it clearer for each of you, but I didn't. So that is included in another part of the comprehensive plan.
Okay. And then, can you? Is it? I may have missed it, but can you define the difference between collector and arterial? Was it in terms of numbers of cars, or is it?
I would have to refer to my engineering staff members for that. I don't know the numbers offhand, but it's a traffic count difference.
How about some examples, just from the map? Can you tell us which ones are collector and which ones, what are the two categories?
Sure. Arterials, Vernon is an arterial, so is France Avenue, 78th Street on the south side is an arterial, are some examples. And some of our collectors include Valley View. On the eastern portion is a collector. In fact, I've got a map right in front of me here. Other examples of collectors are 70th Street, and Wooddale is a collector, while Xerxes is an arterial. And that's mostly primarily due to the amount of traffic that they carry.
Okay, so it's not necessarily the size of the road. Then my next question was going to be: is there a typical width for a collector street as compared to an arterial? Probably not. You can't generalize.
No, but within Edina, most of our collectors are still primarily two-lane roadways.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case all around, but the Living Streets Plan actually will address those widths in terms of collectors versus arterials, local streets.
Okay. And then the reason I ask is obviously because we have had those two negative ones, or the ones that were against sidewalks, and I think the concern was sort of this idea that a huge sidewalk is going to cut across the front yards of them with a 5-foot boulevard. My reading of this is there's some flexibility in determining the actual minimum width of a sidewalk, or even the boulevard, or perhaps maybe even a boulevard might not even be required depending on the situation. Did I read that?
Things do vary, but as of right now, the Living Streets Plan and the policy that's been adopted, or that the city has been practicing these past couple of years, is to have a 5-foot boulevard with a 5-foot sidewalk. That does vary. We've got many projects where we only have a 3-foot boulevard or no boulevard at all, depending on right-of-way and other constraints. But in general, that's the goal. Now, we're able, when we reconstruct a roadway, potentially to shift a roadway a little bit to accommodate that additional sidewalk on one side, depending on the right-of-way availability.
Okay, that's good information. All right, and then you also said that right now we had 78 miles of sidewalk?
That's right.
Okay, so if the goal is to add another half as much, 36 miles or whatever, how is it going to be prioritized, at least on this? Is it strictly, literally, the future active routes to school sidewalks will be given highest priority until the 36 miles runs out?
You know, that's a good question. The comprehensive plan doesn't necessarily talk about phasing for these projects, but as we develop our capital improvement plan every couple of years, and especially when a lot of these are tied to our MSA reconstructions and our neighborhood reconstruction projects. Those are primarily the places that we look to implement these projects. But we do have some standalone active routes to school sidewalks that we constructed this year because we had some available funding. So it's really on a case-by-case basis, but I think that's something that staff needs to consider looking at and working with council on, is looking at what those sidewalk projects will be from year to year, and approve those ahead of time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Seeley.
In any circumstances that these sidewalks are introduced, is there a possibility for the streets surrounding them to be narrowed?
That's also considered part of the Living Streets policy.
Okay.
Living Streets plan, where when streets are reconstructed, potentially narrowing those streets, especially our local streets that have less traffic, and I think we did discuss that here a couple of months back. So that's something that would happen again as opportunities arise with reconstruction projects according to the Living Streets plan that will be hopefully approved beginning of next year.
Okay.
Commissioner Platter.
So when you talk about boulevards and the sidewalks going into the boulevards, those boulevards are all public owned, right?
Correct.
So we don't anticipate that this would be going over any private property?
No,
So this is already, the areas that we're talking about are
everything we're
publicly
discussing
owned
will
right
be
now,
within,
right?
within the public right-of-way. There are exceptions when places like Southdale, where we built the sidewalk,
Right,
Southdale,
yeah.
where we can work with them.
Commercial may be exceptions,
Exactly,
right?
yeah. Residential property, it's all going to be within the right-of-way.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any extra in somebody's yard into their property, I guess what I'm getting at. It'd just be in the public property.
Correct, unless there are some grading issues sometimes where we have to take a driveway back a little bit to accommodate.
Okay.
On that point, what, if anything, is the plan for maintenance of the plantings that are in the boulevard?
That question is something that will be answered during the Living Streets planning process as well with the public works staff that we have on hand. I know that for the Valley View project, they're looking at planting daylilies in the 3-foot boulevard because they're somewhat resistant to salt and weather, and they seem to do well. In those cases, residents would maintain those, but I think we're having those discussions right now. But right now, the residents maintain the boulevards.
Right, and I worry a little bit. I mean, I like the idea of the separation from the traffic for the sidewalk, but if nobody's really maintaining it, it ends up being the repository of all the snow dump and the salt over the winter. You know, it just has the potential to turn into a weed buffer instead of a grass buffer. But Commissioner Platter?
To that point, I think, at least my area, that people have sidewalks, they take care of all the way out to the street, right or
Right.
wrong, even though it's public property. It's just, it looks like it's part of their house and things. So
Right.
I don't see any, at least around my area, that people don't maintain that.
All right, just something to think about.
Thank you.
A couple of questions on the in the context criteria on the second page. One of the context criteria is the street is identified as a park or commercial destination. I'm not sure I understand the street itself or the. Can you give me an example of that? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Again, this is something that was carried over from the Living Streets policy, and the street, this bullet is meant to convey that the street, if it's not adjacent to a park or commercial area, that it leads directly to a park or
Okay.
commercial area.
So
that could be, the wording could be.
Yeah, I would suggest just a little tidying up on that. And the 85th percentile speed being greater than 30 miles an hour, how do we measure that?
We take speed counts when we count traffic. When we put the tubes across the street,
yeah.
yep, they can measure speed as well. And then all those numbers are taken in, and the speeds of the cars are determined. And then the 85th percentile is the 15% of drivers go faster than that speed that's indicated. So that's where the 85th percentile.
Okay.
85% of drivers are under
But
that.
there is raw data collection
Yes,
that we
there
do
is.
from time to time. Okay,
Mhm.
very good. And then the criteria about there is a history of crashes involving pedestrians walking along the roadway. Is there any particular threshold, or have we deliberately not?
We haven't, and
don't want a
none of the
tolerance
cases
level,
here.
I guess.
We don't have any of that currently historically in the city, but that's something we wanted to make sure we included.
On the map, what are some examples of the municipal aid streets?
The MSA streets, again, those are streets that, for the most part, in the future, show the brown dashes. So,
Okay.
And there's some overlap here. Some streets are both MSA streets and collectors and arterials. So there is some overlap. But
So it looks
once again,
like-
Valley View Road, from the western part of town by Macaulay all the way through up to Gleason is a state aid street. And
It's like Hanson.
Hanson's State Aid Street, 58th Street,
78th.
54th
Okay.
Street.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So you mentioned that last night there was a sidewalk discussion at the council meeting?
The discussion was around the Valley View Road reconstruction project for next year, and the staff has proposed a sidewalk on the south side of that road from Macaulay to Mark Terrace Drive with a 3-foot boulevard. And so there was some discussion in terms of resident concerns about sidewalk on that street.
So I'm sorry, Valley View Road from where to where?
From Macaulay Trail on the western part of
Yep.
town up to Mark Terrace Drive. So it's
Oh, sure.
basically
I
just
know,
north
right.
of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was did they decide to put the sidewalks in or not?
They did, yes.
Okay. And there was a previous stretch of Valley View that was discussed that I think is on your map that they decided not to put sidewalks in?
Correct. Last December, that project, which ended up being delayed, construction was delayed till next year. So that's Valley View between Normandale and essentially it's basically just on the northwest quadrant of 62 and 100, that stretch of Valley View right there. Council voted to not include sidewalks at that point on the project.
So that kind of gets to a question about what this means to put this in the comprehensive plan. So I guess I'd be interested in you kind of just helping explain what happens from here. Let's assume the comprehensive plan gets amended and the next sidewalk comes up. What is the process? Does the council approve it? Is it automatically done? Do residents who are along that stretch get a chance to weigh in on it? How would that unfold?
Well, of course, residents always get a chance to weigh in on those projects, but there's a new process that started actually, I think last night may have been the first vote with the new process in terms of any projects that are assessed have to have a 4-to-1 vote at council to be approved. But sidewalks are pulled out separately. Only a majority vote is required for sidewalk projects because it's not they're not assessed to residents. It's funded by the PACS fund. So there were two separate votes for that process, and that's the way that we anticipate this continuing. So that's another way where it's differentiated. And one of the reasons council asked us to move on this effort is that they felt that if the plan was in place and part of the comprehensive plan, that it would carry more weight in terms of their decision process in considering sidewalks on streets.
So, for instance, in the Valley View one that we talked about a minute ago from last December, 3 members voted in favor of that sidewalk, but it did not go forward because it needed 4 votes.
Correct, because it was tied to the assessment, the 429.
And so one of the consequences of adding this PACS money in and not assessing for sidewalks is it'll be a simple majority in the future.
That's right.
For approval of sidewalks. But I assume also that, as you've done this, there isn't, you haven't done the detailed engineering of, what tree might be in the way, what topography might cause a problem, all of those details that you'd have to look at in each particular stretch of sidewalk.
Right. It's all subject to our feasibility studies that we do, and even they're drawn on a particular side of the street, but even that is still subject to a feasibility study.
Yeah, I saw in the report that you said, we're not saying which side of the street. So, if this gets in the comprehensive plan, then it moves forward. As each stretch comes up, there would be the usual kind of notice that we've had before, and even before that, there'd be a feasibility study and all the engineering work to see which side of the street it makes sense on, or if there's some barrier or some issue that is going to create a problem that might need an adjustment. All those things would happen.
And there's more clarity, I think, in terms of having this approved plan when we start notifying residents 2 years out for their neighborhood projects, that we can notify them at that point where sidewalks are in the comprehensive plan, so that process can start early so everyone can be ready when that comes up.
Right. Now, I did see we got a couple of copies of the emails apparently that came in today. I think one of them we had, but one of the issues that was raised is irrigation systems, or I assume dog fences are the same kind of issue. Do we have a policy on that? Is that part of this, or is that part of that whole implementation? What do you do when you actually do the project?
We work with residents at that point to help them, if they are damaged, to get them moved back behind the sidewalk on an individual basis.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Seeley.
In reference to the email that we were just talking about, the last paragraph, or the last, we'll go with paragraph. So traffic speed, I wasn't sure if that was discussed completely in the packet, but I was wondering if I don't know if this is described within this particular area of jurisdiction, but are sidewalks able to control the speed? Just because I know that the 85th percentile above, is it 30 miles per hour? In terms of one of the conditions for sidewalks, is that one of the issues that is going to be addressed with the introduction of sidewalks?
Sidewalks themselves won't reduce speeds, but along with the traffic calming elements that are part of the Living Streets plan, so being implemented along with sidewalks will be some other tools, narrowing streets, street trees, curb bump outs, things like that can help with that problem. We're working with that right now internally about developing a toolkit of traffic calming devices that can work along with sidewalks.
Okay. Is the concept of narrowing streets, though, I feel like, hypothetically speaking, that could pose a threat to car crashes instead of like car versus pedestrian crashes. I don't know if that makes sense. Do you think that could be potentially an issue that we would have to address?
Narrowing streets and narrowing lanes have been shown in recent studies to actually decrease crashes, and those accidents that do happen at lower speeds because people are slowing down because they're much more aware of their surroundings, given that things are a little bit tighter. It's kind of visual friction for drivers.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Platter.
I was going to mention, I think, some of your comments, Chair, on how they're addressed with the particular situation. A sidewalk went on 42nd Street this year, and there's a lot of trees in place and everything, and for the most part, the sidewalk went around all the trees. So it goes straight, and then it curves, and it does a bunch of things to get through there without really any impact that I saw to the existing trees still in the boulevard, but the existing trees were still there to remain. So just to kind of point that out.
Yeah, I thought it was important just to understand the mechanics, because I think this, I mean, to me, this is, we're kind of putting a stake in the ground. We're saying this is the default plan. This is what we're aiming for. But we still have all the engineering we have to do every time we're going to do one of these, and we have to figure out if it works the right way, and residents will have a chance to weigh in and during that process as well. But it is going to make it, you know, more likely. These will be more likely than other projects, because the ones that are not on here will probably take 4 votes. Well, I suppose it'd depend on how they're financed.
Right. The sidewalks, we no longer assess residents for sidewalks, so those will still
So
be.
that's going to be a 3
Even if
vote in
additional
any event.
sidewalks are proposed by residents, they would still come out, provided
Okay.
budget's available out of the PACS fund.
Sure. Commissioner Platter.
Well, I think another good thing about this, it adds transparency to the process. So it does tell where, you know, just like a street plan or a street build-out plan, it shows a sidewalk plan, so people can see in advance, hopefully a lot farther than necessarily 2 days before a public hearing is, that people are aware that this street, you know, if something comes up, it gets rebuilt, has the potential for that. That's
The other
my
thing,
sense on it.
yeah, and the other thing I would say is that it's pretty modest. I mean, you know, maybe, you know, there's a lot of streets that don't have sidewalks on here, and I think I'm sure some folks are concerned that we not have sidewalks in places where there's not a need for them. But these are, I like the kind of rationale that you articulated for why we've got them. We're trying to connect parks to one another. We're trying to get safe routes to schools. We're trying to, you know, do them in the logical places. And it sounds like a lot of thought has gone into creating that map. And, you know, I think there's probably, you know, you can't do this kind of thing without some folks who are going to be thinking about what happens on their street, and it may not feel like it's modest if it's on their street and they don't want it. So,
Sure.
Anyway, are there further questions on this? All right. So, thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank
Don't
you.
go away. It is a public hearing, and I want to open the public hearing and invite folks who are here who would like to comment on it to come forward and share your thoughts.
Good evening. My name is Deanne Dubbs. I live on 5316 Maddox Lane. It's on your sidewalk chart. It's one of the brown routes. And I just found out about this sidewalk about a month ago at the meeting that was explaining the street redo that's scheduled for our neighborhood in 2017. And the letter that came out inviting our neighborhood to that meeting mentioned nothing about sidewalks, but it talked about, you know, the assessment for the street. So I went, and that's when I found out about this sidewalk. When I told my neighbors about this, no one knew about this beautiful plan and all these sidewalks going in. And I'd have to say that that Speak Up Edina, I mean, I don't think anybody really knows about that. I'm glad that you're getting positive comments, and I think that, you know, the plan as a whole is good, but Maddox Lane is not delighted to hear about a sidewalk. I've lived there over 30 years. I've talked to 3 other homeowners on Maddox Lane. We've got a combined living there of over 100 years.
So, Ms. Dubbs, just to make sure I understand, you're between Hanson Road and 100?
And that S-turn, yeah, Maddox Lane is only 2 blocks long.
Oh, it's the little diagonal that then...
Yeah, that little, yeah. So
Okay.
it's just a 2-block
Got
stretch
it.
there.
And what is it that it hooks up with? Is that like 61st or...
Well, it hooks up to the section of sidewalk where the residents were able to vote it down somehow. I talked to a lady who lives further up the road, and she said, we were on that sidewalk plan, but we were able to go to the city council and protest, and they voted us off that sidewalk plan.
Mr. Nolan, I just think it'd be helpful to know where this is for sure. If you have a copy of the map we could put up and just be able to highlight the area that Ms. Dubbs is, I just think it's helpful for me to understand what you're talking about.
The thing is that my whole purpose in coming, the other neighbors couldn't come tonight, was to find out how they were able to present their opposition to the sidewalk and get listen to and get some validation for, you know, what they want for the character of their neighborhood and what they feel, you know, necessary as far as, you know, pedestrian safety and other issues. You know, we didn't know anything about this. We'd like some transparency. We'd like to know why the rush to make this plan if none of the residents even know about it.
There are fair questions. Part of the reason that I raised the question about, you know, what happens next and all those,
right,
and
right.
what
Well,
has
like I say,
happened up until
I
now.
don't know how these neighbors were able to bring their proposal up and have the city council, you know, vote in their favor. What does our 2-block section of Maddox Lane have to do? You know, we're all a little bit concerned. We like the character of our neighborhood. We like our yards all the way down to the curb. We don't feel that the speed is excessive on our street. There's a stop sign at one end and a big S-curve at the other. We don't think people are going that fast on the 2-block stretch. As far as we know, there's been no accidents. We're not connected to anything. Nobody walks on our street to get somewhere. They're just out for a walk, and they could walk anywhere in our neighborhood. People feel perfectly straight. One of the things they're saying is that there's the Wyman Bridge crossing that it bisects the 2-block section of Maddox Lane. Well, cars drive over that. You know, that's one way to get from one side of the freeway to the other, but it's not a reason to put sidewalks in. I think it's that you've got a solution looking for a problem, and I went out and measured, and by the time you add a 5-foot boulevard, a 5-foot sidewalk, that leaves me with 22 feet to my, so it's a third of my front yard would be now, you know, people walking, and it's not that so much as my huge issue with this, and my neighbors too, because we're all kind of concerned about the snow situation. Now, 2 out of the last 3 winters, I've had to get up on my snowbanks and shovel them further into my yard, because by the time the plow comes by and I move the snow out of my driveway, I wouldn't have any place to put, you know, that 5-foot stretch of sidewalk going through my whole front yard. I wouldn't have anywhere to put that snow unless I shoveled it back out onto the street. So I'm just a little concerned how I'm going to be able to keep a sidewalk free. And that About Town magazine that came out said that, you know, we will be fined and the city will come and move the snow and charge us. And I'm not liking what Edina is doing without, like I say, so much as even telling the people. This plan, you know, it sounds lovely, but, and I don't want to be one of those not in my backyard people, but really, my neighborhood is, there's nothing that people walk to in my neighborhood.
So, I don't want to cut you off, but if you could help Mr. Nolan just point out on the screen where exactly we're talking about. I just want to make sure I understand where you're... Oh, okay, so it's that stretch that is right adjacent to the Wyman Bridge.
And can you do the section up here? That's the section where...
That's
where the residents were able to...
That was the one from last December, Mark?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And so...
And then it turns the corner at Mildred, and then it goes down Maddox, right?
Yeah, it's that... there's this sharp little turn here.
Yeah,
And
all
that's
right.
where Valley View used to go under the freeway before the freeway was built.
Oh.
And so it's cut off there, and then Valley View picks up again here, down here.
I get it, okay.
But we're just this little stretch here, and I mean, there's this little tiny park up here that doesn't have a summer program or any, you know, ball games ever. They've just got a swing set. Normandale Lutheran Church, I mean, people don't really, you know, I mean, it's cars on Sunday. We are kind of the frontage road to, you know, the freeway, but, you know, people come in from the exits that they come into to get to the neighborhoods over here, or they come into the neighborhoods over here. And yeah, there is some traffic going across this little bridge here, but there's been no accidents. No people are, you know, people feel safe that are out walking. We just feel that this is being pushed on us, and we'd like to have a say. The neighborhood would like to have a say.
Well, thank you.
And how do we do that?
Well, you're doing some of it tonight.
Okay.
So we're having a public hearing on this, and this is a proposal to amend the comprehensive plan, and then this depending on what happens tonight, well, in any event, it's going to go forward to the city council, and they're going to have a public hearing on it.
Well, when do they make an amendment? When do we get off the city plan, or this thing? How
So you're in it right now. I mean, you're telling us what you think, and then the council is going to hear this, and they're going to have to decide what to do. So
should our neighbors come to that council meeting?
If they're concerned, they sure should, yeah.
And is that when the vote would be taken?
The council is the one who decides. The council is the body that decides on whether to amend the comprehensive plan and exactly how to amend the comprehensive plan.
So we would petition them?
Well, if you're concerned about you being included on the street plan, yes, that would be between now and then, and at that meeting would be a good time. I don't know, when is it scheduled to go? November 3rd. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your remarks. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're way ahead of me. You're going to show me the spot. Okay.
I'll be brief.
Very
good evening. My name is Michael Huey. I live at 5612 Concord Avenue.
I'm sorry, Dewey?
Michael Huey.
Okay, thank you.
5612
Welcome.
Concord. Thank you. I'm here to comment on the plan. I won't be commenting on the plan overall. Overall, I think it makes great sense. I applaud the effort to connect the city, have better sidewalks and pedestrian safety. I have a similar concern as the last speaker, in that as I look at the plan for my particular street, I have grave concerns. I don't think it's a good plan given the traffic and environment around our neighborhoods. So let me orient you to where we are.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
So this is Concord, and so this red dotted line moving up is the proposed sidewalk right here. And then this below us is the school complex.
So you're north of Southview Junior High?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So we're north of red. So three main reasons as I look at it. So the first is no one on our block can understand the rationale. So if you see, that's a sidewalk to nowhere. It's not connecting to other sidewalks, not connecting to trails. It just goes up and stops. We can't figure out the rationale, and there's virtually no traffic. Especially the further you get up, there's literally no traffic except for the handful of houses that would be parking there. Just to give you some context, my wife and I have a 2.5-year-old. We go on walks in the evenings, on the weekends. We walk down the middle of the street. We don't even hold his hand. And that's the nature of the traffic on the street. So I'm struggling with why we need a sidewalk. There's no transit through that area. So it's very puzzling. Also, all of us are concerned with just the attractiveness of the neighborhood. We think sidewalks are functional. We don't think they're beautiful. We think that the beauty of the neighborhood will be degraded. There will be some trees and bushes that will have to go. Obviously, just having the sidewalk there is a problem. And then as the last speaker already went through, there's obviously a lot of cost and nuisance with snow removal, with shoveling, maintenance over time. A lot of us have sprinkler systems, the things that will have to be fixed. So you will understand that well, of course, but my main concern is I just can't understand the rationale. There appears to be no need on that street. And I think similarly to what you heard from the last speaker, a lot of us were a little surprised. We're glad we have this open forum and may have another opportunity to give feedback, but most of my neighbors weren't even aware. I've been trying to make others aware. We'll try to provide more comments online, but my concern is that most people actually aren't aware of what this plan says. I have great confidence that if you went door to door down that entire route, you'd see overwhelming opposition to this plan. So I hope you can take that into consideration. I will do what I can to generate more input from the neighborhood, but please know that while these plans are being made public, not everyone knows.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dewey. Okay. Sure.
I know we're in the public hearing, but so just to kind of maybe try to address some of his questions right now, Mark, so if we go to that matrix and under Concord, it's got 1,300 average daily traffic, ADT, and then it's connecting to Southview Middle School and Coolman Field. Am I correct? And is that how you use that evaluation?
That's correct. Staff felt that first, given the amount of traffic that's on that street, 1,300 cars is a considerable amount of traffic compared to most of our local streets, and because of that amount of traffic, staff felt that particular sidewalk could act as a funnel that could get folks in that neighborhood, kids in that neighborhood, down to the school.
Okay. And then as long as we're on it, where is the other street that was mentioned? Maddox.
That street is in the northwest quadrant. If you look about third from the bottom, it says Valley View Road, Maddox Lane, Normandale
Oh,
Road.
okay.
It kind of covers that whole stretch, and there's, again, anywhere from 1,700 to 2,600 vehicles per day, with speeds up to 38 miles an hour on that stretch. And the Wyman Bridge, it connects to Wyman Avenue Bridge, carries 1,500 vehicles a day, so there's quite a bit of traffic down there, and that's the
So
reason.
what happens, well, we'll come back to that. I'm sorry, Mr. Dewey, did you have I'll let you, in the spirit of how long you all have waited to come and...
I'll have a follow-up question. Is the data that was collected available publicly? Because I, again, have trouble believing 1,300 cars. The only thing I could comment on is there's actually, the school buses come along this street right here, which is Tower. They come along that street and then turn down, this street, which is literally the first two houses on that proposed sidewalk route. So I could imagine that because of the buses coming through here, there could be heavier traffic for all of two houses. There is, the data are wrong. There is no way there are 1,300 cars going up that avenue, and I just question it.
I suspect, and this isn't anything more than anecdotal, but I suspect it's probably all loaded in the beginning of the day and the end of the school day. I know as someone who's had 3 kids go through that school, on more than one occasion they've missed the bus, and I've had to take them over there. And so I suspect there's a lot of traffic associated with that. And I have actually driven down that street while kids are trying to walk to school, too. So,
thank you.
I'll get to you. Hang on. All right. Still have the public hearing open, so if there's others who would like to comment, come on up. You've waited all this time.
wanted to see what the process is.
All right, very good.
We didn't hear about this until I happened to see it on the Edina patch 2 days ago.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
And we have contacted some neighbors on West Shore Drive, and they were not thrilled about it too. I wrote one of the 2 letters, and a neighbor wrote another letter just this afternoon on hearing about it.
Okay.
And we're concerned about...
So why don't you come on up? Now you're testifying. Come on up. Come on in. The water's fine.
I know, I'm not so sure.
My name is Sue Soul, and I live on West Shore Drive. And, pardon me? 7324. And we just, I did have a question about if safety is an issue. Have there been crashes on our street? We have lived there over 26 years, and we have not heard of a single pedestrian car, bicycle car accident. And if there have been ones that support, sidewalks for pedestrian safety, we would like to know those facts, not just studies in general. I don't know if you were referring to studies in general, but when you said that sidewalks are shown to increase pedestrian safety, but
I think it was pretty clear that we were talking about crash data with pedestrians. That was actual data, not averages or
no, but on our
studies
street particularly.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any crashes on our street?
Go ahead, Mr. Nolan.
I'm not aware offhand of crashes or accidents that have happened on West Shore, but the traffic counts and the speed data do show 1,300 cars a day and 32 miles per hour, which is 85th percentile speeds over the 30 mile per hour speed limit. So that's a primary reason that street is on the plan.
Well, I too kind of am surprised at the 1,300 figure. As well, I'm concerned, in the variance procedures earlier, you expressed a desire to preserve trees in the neighborhoods, and as I said in my letter, we inherited some beautiful hardwood maples in addition to pine trees. They are within the right-of-way, but they were there along with the irrigation system as part of what we paid for and valued in our purchase. And right now the maples are in their full glory, and 10 feet would definitely wipe all those trees out on our street. And I know 2 houses down, I was just noticing, and some people have enough of a incline on their yard that they have a stairway that comes and curves down considerably, and they've built some decorative landscape infrastructure that I think a minimum 10 foot, between the boulevard and the sidewalk would come right up to there, and perhaps even encroach upon the stonework that they, stone retaining wall that they've put for theirs. And just the speed of the process, I don't know, in terms of having input, how was this sidewalks plan publicized, or input for this publicized? I just happened to know about it because my husband happened upon a memo, and then I quickly let a few neighbors know, but there were conflicts and illness, etc. So they were not able to come. But I think, in addition to the other neighborhoods, that we too, with more notice, would like to provide more input, and that there was not joy in Mudville. Another question I had too, in terms of West Shore, when I see the kids going to and from Cornelia, our closest school, it seems like more of the walking, well, actually most of them seem to go on buses, but just in terms of if one were to walk to Cornelia, the majority of the pathways, I would think, would be on the east-west streets that would feed over to Oak Lawn and then go up the hill to the school. And I don't, they aren't included in the plan. Whereas West Shore is more of a north-south feeder, which doesn't necessarily have a really direct access because of curved streets and cul-de-sacs. It doesn't seem to have a direct access exactly to the Cornelia School, which is the main, well, I would think the main destination in our neighborhood.
Okay.
So these are just some questions that have arisen.
They're good questions. Thank you for bringing them to us.
Thank you.
All right. Any further public comment? All right. Seeing none, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, so the public hearing is closed. Mark, maybe on the West Shore, could you give us a little sense of that stretch? That's south of 70th, I assume? Yeah, okay.
That's right. This is the stretch here. Again, traffic counts and speed were the primary considerations for this. And again, we could restate what we talked about previously, is that the side of the street hasn't been determined. Those types of impacts that the residents were just discussing would also be taken into consideration. This street is not on our program for the next 5 years, so it's not something that's coming up right away. That doesn't mean it couldn't be a standalone project. Those do happen. However, when things like this happen, feasibility studies are done, and if you take a look at our sidewalk projects over the past few years, rarely do we do everything we can to avoid taking or damaging trees. I think that's something that as a city, certainly, but an engineering staff does all we can to avoid doing that. And if it's combined with a road reconstruction, again, we can, along with narrowing the roadway can be shifted around to accommodate a sidewalk, so then it isn't always necessarily 10 feet from the back of curb in its existing state. The future conditions may allow those things to change. So again, it has to do with pedestrian safety, with the amount of vehicles that are on the road. It is within the walk shed of Cornelia School. Yes, it does go north-south, but traffic counts also are considerable north all the way to 66th Street, so staff felt that this is a north-south route that deserved consideration.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Forrest?
Okay, just to clarify for everybody here and elsewhere about the process, this goes into the comprehensive plan, and in general, it seems to me that especially the ones in red, the city sidewalk streets, they aren't necessarily dictated by state aid money or school routes, right? So those may end up being much lower on the priority list than the others. But before anything happens, definitively, they would have to go through council anyway with another public hearing. So when there actually is a proposed project, these aren't specifically proposed projects right now. They are areas that your data has indicated could benefit from a sidewalk based on safety issues and things like that.
That's correct. And there are several other opportunities for that type of input. And like I said, with neighborhood reconstruction projects, and even on MSA road reconstruction projects, that process starts 2 years before that happens and meetings start, and there are those opportunities. With the publishing of this particular sidewalk plan, the notice went out, I can't remember the date, but it was late September. And in part of that notice that went out to the newspapers was a link to the location where the plan could be found on the city's website. It also went out with Facebook and Twitter blasts. We realize not everyone follows the city's social media, but there were those other efforts involved as well.
So going back to the Maddox Lane, if you can pull that down a little bit.
Oops.
The other way. So if the council voted not to do the Valley View one, but it's on here, does that mean that may come back again in the future, or is it, how would it get initiated? Would the council bring that back, or how would it?
The council could bring it back. The residents could bring it back. If the road is being reconstructed next year,
okay.
I'm not so sure that process can come back for next year's project because it was already gone through the council this past December, but that doesn't preclude something from happening in the future with the sidewalk going in. It meets all of the other requirements for a sidewalk that we've set.
All right.
Excuse me? May I just make one more comment?
Oh, come on up. One more.
So just for general consideration, not for any specific area, but I believe Commissioner Klatterer mentioned that some trees would be surgically navigated. Was it on 42nd Street that you said? I would like to point out that brought to mind the fact that the severe tornadoes, was it from 2 summers ago, when the city of Minneapolis had such incredible damage. A lot of those were boulevard trees, and I believe it was brought to their attention that possibly a lot of those trees that fell and created damage were falling from boulevards where sidewalks had been redone, and that the sidewalks did create root damage that weakened those trees and created extensive damage.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Carr.
I just wanted to clarify again the public posting. You said there was a newspaper description and...
That's right, and for both public hearings. So for this public hearing and for the City Council public hearing was also published in the Sun Currents, and I believe the Star Tribune was sent the news release as well, and the link to the plan was in.
Okay, and then there will be one again, I'm assuming, for the City Council meeting.
Right, that's already been released.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But we had this originally scheduled as a public hearing in September, but then we canceled it and rescheduled it for now.
Right, that's right.
Commissioner Hobbs.
I'm just wondering, is it fair to say that it's nice to have this map, but in some ways we're just really approving the criteria as much as anything? I mean, I guess when I think about traffic studies and thinking about, in some cases, it's going to be a ways until these things might be approved. It's possible, isn't it, that traffic patterns are changed, that traffic usage might change, and with that, the necessity for sidewalk and the route might change. And so, I guess, I mean, again, it's good to have a map, but in many ways, I can imagine going forward that there's going to be some changes potentially to what this is.
When you go by the criteria, that's
right,
correct. Yes.
right. So we're going to use the criteria because that kind of makes sense, but the map itself might change.
It could, yeah. Yes, it can change. And I think as part of the Living Streets plan, I think that document is seen as more of a kind of a fluid plan that would kind of evolve with the types of things that you're talking about.
But it's going to be in the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So it's, I mean, part of the reason we would put something like this in the comprehensive plan is to be transparent about what the default goals are. And so people are buying a house, or people are, they can know that this is an area we're planning at some point to put a sidewalk in.
Right, and there's always opportunities, and council will do that quite often, and staff does sometimes as well, take sidewalks off the plan when it just isn't feasible.
But I just don't want to undersell
Right.
the fact that the map is there, and that's, so
Right.
people, if they don't want it, then this is a time to be talking about it. Commissioner Halva.
I had a question about the map, and it was kind of in reference to Mr. Huey's comments. So on Concord, why is that sidewalk in red and not blue if you said that that was a funnel street to the schools?
That sidewalk was not in the active routes to school plan as a recommended
Okay.
plan. That, however, staff still feels that there is a connection to schools there. It just didn't appear in that particular document, so that's why it's not in blue.
Okay, thanks.
Further discussion? Or any other questions for Mr. Nolan? Sounds like not. Thank you, Mark. I guess I do have one other question now that you just sat down. So the living streets, so from a timing perspective, this is kind of part of a broader living streets plan that I know Commissioner Platter, Commissioner Carr have been participating in, and many others have participated. There's been a lot of staff work, a lot of community work that's gone into creating it. And that living streets plan is ultimately, we're hoping to put that in the comprehensive plan as well. So why are we peeling this out now to put this in rather than putting it all in together?
City Council asked staff to do that, and primarily based on, with the upcoming neighborhood and roadway reconstruction projects for next year, they wanted to have a revised sidewalk up-to-date plan in place and approved moving into those projects for their approvals process.
All right. Commissioner Olson.
Can I make a motion?
You can.
I'd like to move approval of the sidewalk facilities plan for amendment into the pedestrian and bike facilities section of the comprehensive plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? I guess the one thing that I would say is that, I am in favor in general of this, and I can't say that I know the rationale behind sidewalks on each individual street that's on the map. But I think it is important to reach out and make sure that folks know about this, because I don't think it's, we're doing this for a reason, which is to communicate to people that the long-term intent is to have sidewalks in the places that we've charted them here. And if folks have objections to those, they ought to have an opportunity to make those objections heard before the council is making their decision on this. And so if that means it takes another meeting for the council to give more time, so be it. I'll leave it up to the council to decide what they think is appropriate on that. But I do think it's important to give people ample opportunity to understand the gravity of what we're doing here. I think on the whole it's a good thing, but everybody should have a chance to weigh in on whether they think it's a good thing on the particular street they live on. So, with that, is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes. So, for folks who are here, this will then go, Mark, to the council on November 3rd, and that will be a public hearing as well, correct? Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. The next item on the agenda is under reports and recommendations, the lot division, David Hendel, 5320 Kelsey Terrace.
Members of the commission. This is a lot division out on Kelsey Terrace. This is in the Parkwood Knolls subdivision in the northwest corner of the city. It is highlighted on the map here. This is a unique property. So this is the subject property. It actually contains two lots. This little pie-shaped piece is a remnant that actually ended up getting platted as part of Parkwood Knolls 26 as an outlot. This property is held in common ownership by the applicant. So this is a look at the Parkwood Knolls 26th edition plat. You can see that little triangle piece was part of lot 26 to the north. It was also, this is the grading and drainage plan for that addition. Again, it was part of that lot, but not shown as the buildable area, and it was just kind of left over. Ended up being platted as an outlot and sold from I'm drawing a blank now on the name of, I think the Hansons that subdivided all this property, sold it to the property owner as that outlot. There's a utility line that runs through there. There's no real explanation as to why it was an outlot that I could find in the old staff reports, other than it was just this remnant leftover piece that ended up getting platted as an outlot. So what the applicant would like to do here is shift the lot line that separates the two. So it would go from, it would just shift to this little pie-shaped piece. They'd like to build an addition to their house. They had a couple of options here. They could replat the entire property and just create it as one lot. There's quite an extensive process for preliminary and final plat. They've elected not to do that. They just like to shift that lot line, maintain the outlot, and the easement that goes through there. So they've elected to just do this lot division process in order to accommodate that addition. I went out there and took a quick picture. This is what it looks like straight in. So this is the outlot here. You can see there's some extensive landscaping that's taken place as part of from this property owner. So the addition would take place roughly in this location here. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the lot line shift there. There is an easement that runs along this lot line. We don't believe there's any utility lines in there, but they would have to vacate that easement prior to filing of this lot line shift. With that, I can stand for questions.
Questions for Mr. Teague? Commissioner Carr.
Just a question of process. This was put under reports and recommendations versus public hearings. Perhaps you could clarify for me why this is not a public hearing.
Yes, a lot line shift does not require a public hearing.
Okay.
We're not creating a new lot. It's just shifting an existing lot line.
Okay.
So is the remnant a buildable lot?
It's not. Anything that's platted as an outlot, our ordinance states that it's not buildable unless the council deems it a buildable lot. So they would have to go through a process in order to call that a buildable lot. It wouldn't meet any of our minimum lot size requirements in that area, so it's really not a buildable lot.
Is it, do we have an administrative kind of lot subdivision?
We do not.
We don't have one. So
No,
we don't
don't.
have one where you could just combine two lots and do it administratively and not have to go through the whole rigmarole?
You could if that were not an outlot. Because it's an outlot and we have that provision that says the council has to take action saying that an outlot is not buildable. I went through this with Roger.
So my reaction was, why on earth are we continuing to have two lots? It sounds like it's not a buildable lot. Why wouldn't we just turn this into one lot?
We can, but it has to be replatted.
Right.
And we have to do away with the
But the
outlot.
taxes wouldn't make a difference. It's
Well,
still
I was wondering too, why not just move it all the way over in case you want to, in the future, build an even bigger home so you'd have a bigger lot. But then I thought, well, maybe the taxes would be greater because the taxes on an unbuildable lot are much less than they would be on the buildable lot. So if they increased or made it either one lot or moved that line further over, the taxes may increase on that property.
If they were combined also, they could build a much larger house on the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they'll just come in for another.
If they wanted to
Somebody
do that,
else
they
would-
could.
It's just a little, I mean, it's not a big deal. It just seems a little silly to me that we're continuing this nonsense. Commissioner Platter.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
All right. Stop me before I kill again.
Staff
All right,
conditions.
before you do that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Lee.
So Carrie, without this approval, does the planned addition require a variance?
They couldn't do it because the proposed addition goes over the lot line. So they need to shift it over, and they've shifted it over just enough so it would meet the required setback were this to be the lot line.
So it would require platting, basically, if they didn't move the...
Yes.
They'd have to combine the lots.
Yep.
Commissioner Olson, was that the same?
Question, because you had mentioned in here that you don't think that there are any utilities, but that if they have to be relocated, that, they'd have to be relocated onto the outlot. How does that get determined if there are, once they go through the construction, and then would they be responsible for the cost for that?
They would. Yeah, it's part of the vacation of the easement. We notify all the utility
Okay.
companies, and they'll do an inspection to see if there's anything down there.
All right.
Could the owner ever sell off the outlot? Is there anything that ties these two pieces together?
He could sell it. He could. I don't know what it could be used
Still.
for. Potentially could be sold to the property to the north, and they maintain it. But it could be sold separately.
Yeah.
But there is some process that has to be, some approval that has to happen before it could ever be a buildable lot on its own.
It would. They would need council approval to build on an outlot, and two, they would need a variance because it would be a substandard lot.
Right. All right. Commissioner Forrest.
This is just out of curiosity as much as anything else. So can they put, they can use that lot as they do the rest of their yard, though, since they own it, and so they can landscape it and put like a temporary structure on that or something?
Yeah, as you see from the picture, they've done some extensive landscaping over there.
All right, Commissioner Platter, I think we're ready for you.
I would like to make a motion to approve this subject to the staff conditions as noted on the report.
Is there a second? Further discussion? Commissioner Lee.
It just seems to me this should be one parcel. I mean, we're just going to keep. We had to put time on this. So let's say another addition gets added, and this line has to keep moving so that this house can grow. It should be one parcel. I think that what we're doing is trying to accommodate the applicant, and I guess we all have to decide whether that is a function of the council here to do that. But this is a remnant. I think it's kind of an outdated piece of property that really there's no need for it to be separate. In fact, I still think that there could be conditions where something might happen on that property or need to happen or want to happen, and now we've got that issue that they're two separate parcels but one owner. We can't always guarantee that in the future, and I don't know that we want to or not. But to me, it feels like the process really should be to go through the full formal process and make it one property, so that we're not continually being faced with this review.
So I agree with the concept, but I think it's a little harsh to make them go through a whole elaborate process. I think we ought to have an administrative lot subdivision that allows this to just happen at the staff level, to combine the two lots and be done with it. It should have been even less trouble than this.
I think we're the only city that requires lot divisions to go before Planning Commission and City Council. I'm not aware of another city that doesn't allow staff to do those administratively.
How many other outlots are there? Do you know?
Oh,
Are you aware?
3.
Within Parkwood Knolls, yeah, maybe. Yeah, there might be 3 or 4 in Parkwood Knolls, but they're used as a drainage. There's usually easements over them. They're there for a reason. This one, it's just leftover land.
They cut up the fabric and they had some leftover pieces. All right. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right. The motion passes. All right. Next up is correspondence and petitions. We have the attendance sheet and the council update for your reading pleasure. Carrie, I was going to ask on the council update, Did we have any projects that were in front of the council?
Yes, I'd like to comment on those, if I may.
Would you please?
Most significant, well, I guess both projects were significant. Well, I guess we had 3 items now that I think of it. The conditional use permit for the 1 foot rule. Remember, there was the discrepancy between the FEMA floodplain and the watershed district. The council did approve that. The second was the Beacon project, the remodel of the TCF Bank building, and the council unanimously approved that on a first reading basis. We will take second reading back to them after the Met Council has taken action on the comprehensive plan amendment. That's anticipated to take place on November 12th by Met Council. So council would take final action on November 19th, I believe it is. And the final item was the France Avenue restaurant. And I'd like to compliment the Planning Commission for your discussion last time. With your conditions and requirements for the applicant to revise the plan and bring them back before the council. I think they did a pretty nice job of that. They created the boulevard-style sidewalk, 8-foot boulevard, 8-foot sidewalk. They proposed it as a straight-line sidewalk. Council talked about it meandering a little bit. You had that discussion as well. So they said they'd be bringing that back. They do have a connection, obviously, from that boulevard-style sidewalk into the building, and they updated those building renderings. They provided angles in color of all 4 sides, showing brick on all 4 sides. There is still the stucco ephes element accents, but the renderings looked much better than what we reviewed the last time. So kudos to your review last time.
Very nice. Okay. Chair and Commission comments. I wanted to just recap. We did have a work session before our meeting this evening. The purpose of the work session was to discuss the whole issue of residential redevelopment in the Southdale area and the projects that we have had come before us, and the fact that we anticipate more will be coming in front of us. And we had a little bit of discussion about how we can be working toward identifying the issues that we ought to be thinking about if we get particularly planned unit development proposals in front of us in the future. It feels, I think I'm accurately reflecting the sense of the group that's saying that it feels kind of like a comprehensive plan discussion, but that we don't have time to wait 4 years for a comprehensive plan change. And so we're doing a little bit of thinking about what kind of process we might put in place to learn more about what the issues are that we ought to be concerned about, and make sure that we're starting to convert those into policies as we see more projects in the future. So stay tuned as we work to try to manage that issue. And that's all I have. Are there any other reports, Commissioner Platter?
Yeah, 2 nights ago, Tuesday night, we had a work.
Last night.
Last night, yes, it is last night.
Seems like 2 nights ago.
Yes, it did. We had a work session with the City Council on the proposed tree ordinance. Commissioner Carr and Commissioner Lee were there, and I don't think there's anyone else. But it was a very good discussion. I thought a lot of positive comments, and I think it got some pretty good momentum going. Planner Teague was going to redraft the ordinance based upon that, and then we'll have to, I'm assuming, bring it back here and go through that. But like I said, it seemed to have some momentum, and hopefully we can get something passed on that rather soon. I don't know if there's any other comments from the other commissioners there.
Thank you for your persistence on that effort. Commissioner Lee?
I'd like to give an update on the Wooddale Valley View Small Area Plan. So we are continuing to meet every other week, and right now our consultant team is really taking all of the information that it has gathered to date, and will be working towards some scenarios that will be presented before the public. that will occur on another Saturday morning workshop. So it's a community workshop. It's called our Dream Workshop. So it's going to allow residents to dream a bit, hopefully, by looking at these scenarios. And what we're really looking for, and our consultants are looking for, is feedback. So obviously we're hoping to get some pretty detailed comments so that some of those scenarios will really set the direction for where they take this small area plan document in the final stages. So I thought it was interesting that we saw tonight that the public process and the way we notify residents is really a tough issue to grasp. We're very much relying on, we're going to be using Speak Up as our forum for gathering information, and our consultants are actually waiting to see the input. So I hope that residents understand that it's not just like many other, I feel, feedback or blogs that people kind of anonymously post to, but really that this is one critical element that our consultants have written into as far as the community engagement piece. They are relying on it to receive feedback from people who have not already contributed, those who can't make that Saturday morning, and I know it's a tough time, and even people who have before. To just state it again, we have 5 pages, and this document has been posted publicly in all the archives for our small area plan meetings, and it lists every single issue that has been brought up, and I'd have to say at least 3 formats now, where we did a kickoff, we did a Saturday review, it took into account the small area planning team comments, individual meetings with the neighborhood, Pamela Park Neighborhood Association and the Concord Neighborhood Association. So all this information gathering obviously is trying to cast the widest net and include as many people who feel that they want to weigh in on this process. And I really would encourage everyone in our city to get on that Speak Up forum. And as well, the other one is it community, I'm trying to think of the email list. Is it City Extra? For signing up for City Extra. And that's really how you get the email notifications. Many people came to the mic tonight and said, this is the first time hearing about it. Well, City Extra pretty much gets it out there right away, so you'd be the first to know. So I just wanted to state that our first forum topic went up, and again, that we're going to be releasing probably, I would say, 3 topics over the next few weeks leading up to that final report.
And this will be on Speak Up?
Yes.
Okay.
The first topic just got released, so the question, for example, is here. We stated, how can we accommodate pedestrian travel in the area of Wooddale Valley View, and what can be done to promote business vitality for the node? So we'll be pretty specific in some of our questions. Doesn't mean that residents have to necessarily stick to that topic, but it's coming directly from our consultants, and they're looking for specific information and feedback. So I hope people will participate on that. But I think we've got a great process going, and hopefully we'll get some good information on that next workshop on November 8th.
So can you remind us the time and the place of that workshop?
Yes, the format has been at 8 a.m. in the morning, so it's tough on a Saturday, but we definitely get people out of there by noon, so I think this one might even be a little bit shorter than the last one. So.
And where?
It will be at the Edina Senior Center at Grandview.
Which is in the basement of the library, not the basement, but the first floor kind of behind the public library.
Correct. Yep.
Anything to add, Commissioner Forrest?
Yes, I was unable to attend that first workshop because I was out of town, but I've heard some very positive things, and I really continue to be impressed and credit the resident members of the small area planning team. And I don't mean to, I can think of a number of people in the contributions, but I do want to give a shout out. For example, Connie Carino, one of our members, has written blog entries on behalf of us, and it's posted as a planning commission type contribution to the boards and commission blogs on the city website. She's done a second one now for that, and it's nice to have that perspective versus the word from the city on high or whatever. And in addition, she presented at the workshop a historical background of the area, and she did quite a bit of research. And she, I know that the director of the Historical Society was impressed with the work she had done. And I think that's one thing that we should continue to remember as we go through this process, is to use the Historical Society as a tool. They have a lot of good information, especially if they have some lead time to dig things up. They will even contact individuals that they know lived in an area at a certain time and get more information from them. So it's something we should keep in mind as we go forward, say with the Cahill Small Area Plan next year and stuff, because it can be very valuable, and it really helps engage the residents too. They get a sense of ownership from that. So.
I have to say, I did have a chance to attend that meeting, and I thought it was terrific. Commissioner Lee and Commissioner Forrest deserve a lot of credit, and I really enjoyed Connie Carino's historic presentation. It is interesting when you do these planning things. It's really helpful to do the history, because it reminds people that it wasn't always like it is now, which means it won't always be like it is now. And she did a great job it's just amazing the changes over time that have happened in that area, and gives you some good ideas for moving forward. So I thought it was really well done, and I commend you on your continuing work on it. Any other comments from commissioners? Staff?
I do, actually. I'm sorry for the late
That's all right.
time, but I've been thinking about our review of variances recently. As some of our more veteran members of the commission recall, we used to have a zoning board of appeals, and variances were handled very different from the typical planning commission. It has been kind of a convenience for residents. We had that zoning board of appeals. We require just a 15-day lead time application due just 15 days prior to the meeting date. But as we've evolved in our review of these variances, it's become more and more similar to our commercial reviews. So I'm thinking that instead of that 15-day review period, that maybe we make it the same as all other applications. It's a 30-day lead time, and it gives staff more opportunity to work with the applicants to get the plans right. We're always fighting right at the deadline. I got to get on the agenda. And we're starting to see more and more variances. After we changed the code a couple of years ago to deal with that non-conforming setback issue, the variance workload decreased, and we didn't have these issues. But now we're starting to see 2, 3 on every agenda. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. If you don't have to give me any feedback now, but if you have any thoughts, feel free to share an email or share any thoughts now. But that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. The first of the year going to require a 30-day lead time. And when we don't get the plans right, it gives us a little more time to make sure that they are right. Like the plans this evening, they had everything there, it just wasn't clear on the map. So we either need to do a better job of highlighting specifically what can't be seen, highlighting those setbacks, and we can do a better job.
It's almost like we have to give them a template of how to present, because we've had some that have been really well done, and then they're pretty easy to work your way through, and you can make a judgment about them. But boy, sometimes it's just picking through a whole. The one tonight ended up being really compelling, but you wouldn't have known it until they got here and explained it to us. So.
That makes sense because you have half of the time.
Right.
I didn't understand that. I thought it was, I say do it.
So that may make it easier for you to coach them to get those things
That's what we're
clear
thinking.
for us. Yeah, not a bad idea. Commissioner Carr?
And is there any special process that you have to go through to change that time?
We don't. It's still, the notification process is still the same. It just builds in a little extra time for us. So we'll use the next couple months to start notifying builders. We're going to make that change come the first of the year.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. All right. Anything further? Any other comments? That's all from staff, Carrie? All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. We are adjourned.